Hi, welcome back, guys. This is your friend. Cinnamon Roll, what if with another fiction? What if Eden's Zero meets My Hero Academia? Now, before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. If you want more videos like this, now let's get into the fanfic. Hey, are you okay? A voice asked as Izuku slowly roused himself awake. He looked to his right to find not the boy he had protected, but rather a little girl with ash blonde hair, wearing a blue shirt and a sky blue skirt. Can you get up? She inquired of him. The little quirkless boy managed to sit up, wincing from the bruises Katsuki and his friends had dealt to him. What happened? The little girl questioned curiously out of concern. Tears pricked his eyes as his lips quivered. And nothing, he claimed in a stutter. I just tripped, he mentioned. The girl didn't seem convinced, staring at him worriedly as she remained crouched beside him. If you want to tell me, you can, she assured to him. I want to help you, she said, much to his surprise as he blinked. He glanced down at the ground, looking at his dirtied shirt and shorts, along with his red shoes. His lips quivered again before he sniffled. W was trying to help somebody from getting hurt, he stammered out as the girl listened with intrigue and surprise upon her face. But, they knew D didn't have a quirk. He mentioned, so they hurt me instead. He told the girl beside him. You don't have a quirk? She asked with a tilt of her head. Izuku merely nodded to confirm it. She glanced off to the side for a moment in thought, blinking as she remembered something. Do you want to be a hero? She inquired on. The little boy nodded again. Well, you can still be one, she pointed out, balling her little hands into fists. Huh? Izuku uttered in confusion. Like those heroes in comics that fight with cool gadgets, or just kung fu and stuff, she noted excitedly. You could become the first quirkless hero, she mentioned. Hearing all of that brought a brightness back into the little boy's eyes. He saw the little girl stand up. Can I walk you home? She offered, extending her right hand out to him. I don't want to leave my new friend behind, she pointed out with a smile. Blinking in surprise, Izuku took her hand without thinking, allowing her to pick him up from the ground. Moments later, they were together on the sidewalk, hand in hand. What's your name? The little girl asked of the boy after a moment. I Izuku, he stuttered in response. Nice to meet you, Izuku, she greeted back. My name's Rebecca, she introduced as she kept smiling. The little boy nervously smiled back and blushed a little. She reminded him of a dream he had where All Might would take his hand and walk him home just like this. Do. He stammered, getting her attention. Do. You have a quirk? He asked of her. Yeah, she answered with a nod. My mom says it's an ether-type quirk, she mentioned. Ether-type? Izuku repeated in confusion as they continued their trek. Oh, there's some people who've got the same quirks as their moms or dads, Rebecca told him. It's when something called ether inside our bodies makes up a power that we can control, she explained on. Want to see mine? She asked of him. Oh, sure, he responded with a stutter. Rebecca giggled, closing her eyes to concentrate. Before too long, Izuku glanced down in amazement to find the bright blue winged symbols upon her legs. Whoa, he uttered out. My mom let me name my quirk Leaper, the little girl pointed out, causing him to perk up. I can move really fast, she mentioned excitedly. Hang on, she called out before she dashed into a sprint, causing Izuku to yelp out of shock. They sped past surprised adults, laughing happily all the while. Hey, the little boy began to say, getting his new friend's attention. Do you want to be a hero, too? He asked her. She blinked in surprise. Well, I guess I do now, she replied happily. Let's be heroes together, she insisted of her new friend, who nodded with his own smile. Hey, Rebecca, a voice called out, catching the attention of the Leaper quirk user as she looked up from checking her phone to see a group of girls approaching her. You gonna be able to hang out with us at the mall after school? One of them asked. Oh, sorry. she apologized, sheepishly rubbing the back of her head. I'm swamped with courier work and taking care of Happy. She pointed out to them. That's too bad. Another of the girls said, sounding disappointed. But you're so dedicated. Rebecca, one girl with pigtails mentioned. You manage your time so well, she added as a compliment. Well, I am fast. The Leaper quirk user admitted in reply, chuckling a little. There was only 1 year left for her at Aldera Junior High. She was already on track to enter the hero course at whatever school she'd choose. Over the years, she had been spending her time working partly as a mail courier thanks to her quirk along with various other odd jobs. After leaving the orphanage where she had been raised upon getting into middle school, she had to make a living for herself, and she was happy to do that while still in school. No doubt thanks to her former caretaker. Thank you. Which, she said inwardly with gratitude. The bell rang, signaling the end of the school day. As Rebecca sauntered about the halls, she started to pick up on some chatter from one of the classrooms. And then she heard frantic screaming. She widened her eyes upon recognizing the voice, quickly hurrying over to the classroom. Izuku, she cried out. She gasped in surprise to find the quirkless boy with smoke coming off from his shoulder, no doubt due to the heat being put onto him from Katsuki's hand. The two of them and the others perked up as they noticed the Leaper quirk user standing at the doorway. Rebecca, Izuku stammered out. HMPH, Katsuki scoffed, shoving him aside as he and the others headed for the doorway. Rebecca stood there firmly, taking on a serious look. What were you doing to Izuku, Kaken? She asked the explosion quirk user as he approached. We were just giving him a little friendly advice is all. One of the boys responded with a shrug. Though I thought he'd at least have a little fight in him. The other boy remarked as he chuckled with his friend. Rebecca glared at both of them angrily. Hey, here's one last piece of advice for you, nerd, Katsuki said, getting her attention along with that of Izuku's as he was turned away. Just pray that you'll be born with a quirk in your next life, he advised. And take a swan dive off the roof of the building, he added. Rebecca froze in shock. Did he really just say that? Whether it's supposed to be a joke or not didn't matter. Katsuki had essentially just told Izuku to kill himself. Tensing his shoulders, the freckled teen turned to face his bully with a fierceness in his eyes. But he sneered back, letting small explosion burst off of the palm of his right hand. Something wrong? He asked. Izuku shrunk with fear, unable to speak. Yeah, there's something very wrong, Rebecca growled out. Huh? Katsuki uttered. At that moment, the Leaper quirk user slapped him across the face with her left hand. Everyone else in the room gasped in shock. How the hell can you just say something like that? Rebecca shouted angrily in question. Even if that was supposed to be some stupid joke, it's not funny, she pointed out. You can't just go around telling people to kill themselves, she mentioned, gnashing her teeth together as she was ready to smack him again. However, Katsuki grabbed her arm by her wrist before she could. You're trying to get into UA too, right? He guessed, narrowing his eyes. I'm not trying to one-up you, Kaken, Rebecca pointed out. I just want to be the best hero I can be, she stated. Saying with Izuku, she added, looking past him to the freckled teen. Rebecca, he uttered out, shocked by her defense of him. However, that look vanished into one of horror as he noticed the smoke coming off of her gripped wrist. She winced from the burning feeling. Neither of you are getting into UA, Katsuki declared as he sneered at the Leaper quirk user. Compared to me, you two are just nothing more than bugs. He added mockingly. Something started bubbling inside of Izuku. Something that hadn't happened since his childhood. Flashback. Ah, Izuku yelped as he hit the ground on his back, whimpering with agony. Ha, Katsuki laughed, standing amongst his friends as they glowered over the quirkless boy in the playground with them. What's your problem, Deku? He asked of him as he sat up. You know you can never be a hero without a quirk. He pointed out mockingly. Maybe you're right. Izuku admitted as he sat up. But I can still try, he proclaimed. There's nothing wrong with that, he stammered out as tears pricked his eyes. Katsuki just grinned deviously. He punched his right hand, making a small explosion burst off from it. You're just never gonna learn, are you? He guessed. Izuku grimaced in fright, expecting another barrage of bullying from the explosion quirk user and his friends. Stop it. A familiar voice called out as a figure suddenly ran out in front of the freckled boy, outstretching her arms protectively. You meanies, leave him alone, Rebecca yelled with a fierce expression upon her face. Rebecca. Izuku stuttered in disbelief. Who's that? The boy with the gargoyle-like wings asked. I think she's one of those orphan kids being raised by that sorceress hero. The boy with extendable fingers answered. Doesn't matter who she is, Katsuki chimed in, getting their attention. Anyone who'd defend someone useless as Deku is stupid, he remarked, lunging forward. Rebecca didn't have time to react as the explosion quirk user blasted her back with a blast from his right hand. She fell onto the ground beside Izuku on her back, wincing in agony. Rebecca, he screamed in shock, seeing her slowly sit back up. Ha ha, Katsuki laughed, getting his attention as he turned to see the devilish smile he wore on his face. Guess anyone who even likes Deku is as useless as he is. He didn't even have time to finish his remark as he was punched in the face, being sent stumbling back. Everyone widened their eyes in shock. Rebecca was especially surprised as her eyes shimmered. Standing in front of her was Izuku, and he didn't look afraid anymore. He looked angry, righteously so. Don't hurt Rebecca, he shouted, balling his little fists tightly. End flashback. Seeing Rebecca held by the boy who bullied him for almost all of his life made that anger bubble in Izuku once again. He clenched his fists tightly. He gnashed his teeth together. Kakin. He snarled out, catching the explosion quirk user's attention as he glanced back and blinked in surprise to find the fierce expression of anger in the freckled teen's eyes. Let her go, he demanded in a growl. Both Katsuki and his friends were quite stunned by the change in tone that he displayed. A once meek boy now had the expression of a fierce man. It was in that instant that Rebecca freed herself from the grasp of the explosion quirk user before jogging over to her friend's side. Tusk, Katsuki scoffed after a moment, turning away. Neither of you'll get into Yua, he proclaimed before heading out. I'm just that much better than you, he stated. That left Izuku and Rebecca alone in the classroom. Hey, I'm sorry you had to see that. Rebecca, the quirkless boy apologized, interjecting her while gathering his things as he put his backpack on. No, it's okay, she assured with a shake of her head. But why do you let him treat you like that? She asked him. He glanced away ashamedly. I guess if I tried fighting back, he'd just get what he wants and prove that I'm weaker, he told her in reply. So you're being the bigger person. She realized. Huh. She sighed. Can't we at least tell a teacher? I don't hold grudges, Rebecca, Izuku interrupted again. Kakin's a jerk, but he'll just make my life even worse if he gets in trouble because of me. He pointed out. Besides, he hasn't gotten in trouble already. He mentioned in remembrance. Rebecca glanced down sadly. She followed him outside, seeing him grab his burned and soaked hero notebook from the small pond outside school. Kakin did that? The leaper quirk user guessed, receiving a mere nod in response from Izuku. Huh. She sighed out. Hey? She began, getting his attention before he could walk away. Do you need a hug? She guessed with a small smile, holding her arms out to him. He blinked in surprise before managing to smile. Yeah, he answered. The both embraced each other warmly. Remember, you're gonna be the best quirkless hero this world's ever seen, Rebecca pointed out to him, pulling herself back and putting her hands onto his shoulders. You just gotta go plus ultra, right? She guessed with a wink. Eh. Izuku chuckled out as he blushed a little. All right, he stuttered out. At that moment, the Leaper Quirk user felt something buzz in the pocket of her skirt. She pulled out her phone and gasped. "Oh crap, I'm gonna be late," she exclaimed, quickly removing her shoes and shocks from her feet, stuffing them into her backpack. "Leaper breaks any shoes still, huh?" the freckled teen guessed, causing his friend to giggle sheepishly. "It's why I usually just wear sandals," she pointed out. "See you tomorrow, Izuku," she exclaimed in farewell, activating her quirk as her markings glowed. She sped off quickly as her friend waved goodbye. He took a deep breath and exhaled a calmed breath. He wasn't going to be deterred. No matter who would tell him differently, he would still do his best to become a hero, even if he didn't have a quirk. "And there you go," Rebecca said as she handed off the package to the elderly woman at the apartment building. "Oh, thank you so much, dear," she responded with gratitude, granting the Leaper Quirk user a few extra yen bills as compensation. "Make sure you treat yourself for all your hard work," she advised. "Will do," Rebecca assured in reply with a nod. She dashed off afterwards, heading onto the sidewalk before checking her phone. Her mail courier job was made extra efficient thanks to her quirk. Deliveries were done so quickly and earned her a lot of tips from recipients. She was modest about how much money she was earning from such a job, but it really was rewarding. It's what allowed her to leave the orphanage and start living in her own apartment. "Okay, last delivery," she noted while wiping away the sweat forming on her brow. Reading what was on her phone, she blinked in surprise to find that the person she was going to bring a package to was Enko Midoriya. A small smile came across her face. After a little while, she arrived in Musutafu, hurrying up the stairs to the apartment complex where her best friend lived. Though Izuku never visited the orphanage where she grew up once, she visited him almost every day to play. Though he was shy, he wasn't afraid to be around the girl who said he could be a hero, even without a quirk. And likewise, Rebecca was glad to have an actual friend outside of the orphanage. She was a little worried after how she saw Izuku let himself get bullied by Katsuki and his friends. Hearing the explosion quirk user basically tell him to kill himself was just beyond bullying at that point. But despite that, she couldn't do a thing. Rather, Izuku wouldn't want her to. "Huh," she sighed out. For now, she would have to just keep quiet for his sake. But in exchange, she'd definitely make him play against her in video games, which she won almost all of the time. That would have to suffice. She knocked at the door upon arriving at the specific apartment, stepping back before the door was opened. "Oh, Rebecca," Enko yelped in surprise before smiling. "Hi, Mrs. Midoriya," the Leaper Quirk user greeted before holding out the last package she had. "Here you are," she said, allowing the middle-aged woman to take it into her hands. "Wow, I thought this wouldn't get to me until tomorrow," she admitted out of astonishment. "You really are fast, Rebecca," she pointed out. "I always aim to be," the courier girl responded with a wink, causing Enko to giggle. She reached into her skirt pocket to get a tip ready for the Leaper Quirk user, but she took notice. "Oh, I don't need a tip," she assured, holding out her left hand reassuringly to the middle-aged woman's surprise. "Seeing your smiling face is more than worth it," she mentioned cheekily. "Well, I really don't feel right about not giving you something," Enko admitted, scratching at her cheek with her right pointer finger. Then, "Is Izuku around?" Rebecca asked curiously. "I'd have to run back home to take care of Happy, but I can come back for dinner and play on my Switch with him," she pointed out. "Oh, that sounds wonderful," Enko exclaimed. "Izuku's not home yet though," she recalled, causing the Leaper Quirk user to blink in surprise. "Maybe he's out studying or watching another hero battle a villain," she suggested, letting out a chuckle. "You know him," she remarked with a shrug. Rebecca smiled. "Yeah, I do," she responded. With a wave goodbye, she left the apartment complex and speedily hurried off. She never remembered ever missing Izuku at his home whenever she came by to drop off a package. Maybe he was held up due to a hero arriving around wherever he was. Guess after I take care of Happy, I'll go and find him, she decided inwardly, hurrying around a corner. Rebecca noticed the billowing smoke as she walked along the Musatafu streets, heading back to Izuku's apartment. After feeding her cat and getting herself cleaned up and changed, she grabbed her Switch and hurried off. The most exciting part of gaming with her best friend was the banter they shared during that time, especially during games in which either one of them could win. I wonder if I'll get to see him rage quit again, she thought, giggling a little. At that moment, she remembered how angry he appeared back at school when he saw her getting picked on by Katsuki. A small blush came across her face as she smiled. Izuku was someone she genuinely appreciated as a friend. Even though many of the girls in her class thought she was crazy to hang out with a quirkless boy, she didn't care. She just liked hanging out with him. Once she turned a corner, she noticed a crowd. During the earlier days of middle school, she and Izuku had watched with such crowds to see heroes take down villains. She remembered seeing him scribble frantically in one of his hero notebooks with every detail he could think of for the future, making her giggle. She figured that spending a minute or two watching another battle like that would be fine. She joined the crowd and instantly gasped. There were already plenty of heroes on the scene, facing what looked to be a monster of sludge. That wasn't what shocked Rebecca, though. It was the fact that she could see Katsuki's face in the villain's body. What? She gasped out, covering her mouth with her right hand in fright. What was he of all people doing here? How did he wind up in such a situation? It was all so bizarre to witness the explosion quirk user entrapped by a villain. And he looked scared. Then something else made Rebecca gasp again. It was seeing Izuku jump out from the crowd and run forward. In spite of the cries of the nearby heroes, he kept running without a second thought in the world. The leaper quirk user wanted to hurry over and get him out of there, but something was telling her not to intervene. She only watched as Izuku threw his backpack, with its contents spilling out and hitting the sludge villain, also making him loosen his hold on Katsuki as he gasped and coughed for air. Kakin! The quirkless boy screamed, desperately trying to get the explosion quirk user out of the monster's hold as he clawed at his slimy body. What the hell? Why are you here? Katsuki questioned aloud. I don't know, Izuku answered immediately, still trying to free the boy who bullied him. My legs. They just started moving, he cried out. The slime built back up around Katsuki though, entrapping him again as he grimaced. Even so, Izuku wasn't going to give up. He thought back to everything he experienced in his life from being diagnosed as quirkless. Hearing what his doctor had to say, hearing his mother apologize in wishing things were different, and hearing the taunts and laughter of his own classmates. It made him wonder why he was even doing what he was. But he knew the answer in the end. Kakin, he began. I couldn't just stand there and watch you die, he exclaimed. And at that moment, Rebecca finally leapt over the crowd as her markings glowed brightly. Everyone was just as shocked to see her jump into the fray and start running. Hey, stop, Death Arms yelled. But she didn't listen. She just ran at full speed in spite of how scared she was. Her best friend was in trouble, and she wanted to save him. Just a little bit longer. The sludge villain noted as her reformed his left eye. And I'm done playing with you, he declared, about to slam his left arm into Izuku. But all of a sudden, Rebecca flew in and struck him in the face feet first. As he recoiled, his hold on Katsuki loosened even more, allowing his arms to be freed. Rebecca? Izuku exclaimed in shock. Help me pull, Izuku. The leaper quirk user insisted quickly, grabbing Katsuki's right arm. All right. The quirkless boy responded in a stutter as he latched onto the bully's left arm and pulled with her. His eyes shook in disbelief. Why? He growled out in question. Just shut up and let us help you. Rebecca yelled back in between grunts before she and Izuku finally freed him from the sludge villain's body. falling onto the ground together. Huh. She exhaled in relief. However, that feeling instantly vanished once she spotted the monster looming over them. You brats. He roared angrily, about to strike them with his arm again. There was a huge burst of dust from the impact that followed. But when it settled, the 3 middle school students found that they were unharmed. I really am pathetic, a dignified and powerful voice admitted. Izuku, Katsuki, and Rebecca looked up to find All Might standing over them, having blocked the attack with his right arm. All Might. The former of the trio uttered out in disbelief. I told you the traits that make a great champion, he noted while pulling the slime off of his body. But I see now that I wasn't living up to my own ideals, he exclaimed before breaking free. Izuku and Rebecca's eyes shimmered with amazement, while Katsuki's shook in disbelief. They watched the #1 hero of Japan grab hold of the villain's body with his left hand, rearing his right fist back. Pros are always risking their lives. That's the true test of a hero, he declared proudly as blood sprayed from his mouth. Damn you, All Might, the villain yelled, attempting in one last-ditch effort to stop him. But he was too late. Detroit. The hero started to bellow, grabbing onto Izuku, Katsuki, and Rebecca with his left hand. Esmamela Ash, he roared, unleashing a powerful punch that made the sludge monster splatter apart as wind rushed throughout the air, forming a tornado that towered into the sky. The 3 Aldera Junior High students momentarily passed out from the shock. But what none of them realized was that they had been a part of something incredible. Huh. Rebecca sighed, trudging along the streets beside Izuku at sunset. Well, that turned out to be one hell of a day, she muttered, though she managed to grin about it a little. After the villain had been dealt with, she and her best friend had been strictly lectured by the heroes. To her chagrin, she saw some of them actually praising Katsuki for his bravery, whatever that was supposed to mean. It was mainly his fault that the villain had been so troublesome. She looked over to Izuku and saw his almost despondent expression. He seemed really tired, and emotionally, he looked just as worn. Hey, Rebecca said, getting his attention as they came to a stop. She held out her arms. Do you need a hug? She asked of him. A light smile came across the freckled teen's face before he took her up on her offer, embracing her warmly as she did the same to him. Those heroes didn't know what they were talking about, she noted to him reassuringly. I thought you were really brave out there, she admitted. I thought you were brave, too, Izuku replied before he pulled away from her. But the heroes had a point. He confessed to her surprise. We really did jump in recklessly, he pointed out while glancing away. Yeah, true, Rebecca concurred. They exchanged another smile to each other, about to head back to their respective homes. Deku, Katsuki's voice suddenly yelled out, getting their attentions as they saw him run over to them. Kakin, Izuku uttered out, surprised that the bully was even here. Why? Listen, he growled out, balling his hands into fists. I would never ask for weaklings like you to help me, he claimed as he trembled with anger. Don't think you can look down on me, he shouted. Huh? Got that? He yelled on. I was fine by myself, he exclaimed. You're just a quirkless failure who won't even cut it as a cop, he pointed out to Izuku. And you're just some stupid delivery girl ditz, he added to Rebecca, who gasped out of offense. You didn't help me, he proclaimed on, glaring ahead. You did nothing, he growled. Don't you forget that, he shouted, whipping back around and trudging away angrily. I don't owe you anything, he finished. What was that? The quirkless boy wondered inwardly, while the leaper quirk user beside him stuck her tongue out at their departing bully. In spite of all that, Izuku did know that he didn't really do much to help. But at least he tried. Rebecca looked over to him and smiled. Hey, you're still gonna be a great hero, she reassured, bumping her right fist against his chest as he blinked in surprise. He was shocked that she still believed he could walk down that path. But that didn't change the fact that someone important he looked up to had told him otherwise. Rebecca, he began, causing her to perk up. I need to tell you something, he said, clutching the straps of his yellow backpack tightly. But at that moment, I am here, All Might exclaimed as he suddenly slid onto the street. Both Izuku and Rebecca yelped in surprise. All Might, the former stuttered out. Where'd you come from? He wondered aloud. And how'd you get rid of all those reporters? He questioned on. Ha 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 ha. The number one hero laughed out. I stand for justice, not sound bites, he proclaimed proudly before starting to flex his muscles. Because I am Olam. He suddenly burst into a cloud of white steam, transforming back into his skinny form as he spat up blood. Izuku and Rebecca shrieked in shock, with the latter being the most stunned as she hadn't seen this disheveled version of the number one hero. What's going on? She questioned while stammering. All Might took notice of her and grimaced before letting out a sigh, wiping his lips. Moments after he and Izuku brought the Leaper quirk user up to speed on the situation, he went on to address the quirkless boy. He thanked him for doing what he could against the sludge villain, having given him enough time to act. He went on to thank Rebecca as well for her efforts. However, Izuku still felt that it was his fault things had gone so wrong. He had wasted All Might's remaining energy and the rest of his time. I'm not done, the number one hero said, causing him to turn and face him. You told me you didn't have a power, he pointed out in remembrance. So when I saw this timid, quirkless boy try to save a life, he continued, it inspired me to act too, he told Izuku, who perked up in surprise. There are stories about every hero. He mentioned how they became great, he added. Most have one thing in common, he stated. Their bodies moved before they had a chance to think, almost on their own, he explained. The quirkless boy's eyes shimmered. Cherry blossom petals fell down nearby as a breeze blew about the street. Rebecca looked to her best friend and smiled. She knew what All Might was trying to say. Izuku did, too. He trembled, whimpering as he lowered his head. He thought back to when his mother had apologized to him for not being able to give him a quirk of his own. That wasn't what he needed to hear. He needed someone to tell him, to believe that he could be. And today, that's what happened to you, Rebecca noted, making him glance over to her and shook. He saw the tears pricking her eyes as she smiled warmly at him. Thinking back to when they first met, not once did the Leaper quirk user think Izuku's dream to become a hero was out of the question. She always believed in him. He latched onto his middle school uniform with both hands, tearing up as he dropped onto his knees. The wind rushed through All Might's hair as he stood ahead and stared down at him. Young man, he began. You too can become a hero, he stated. Izuku cried with gratitude, having earned his idol's approval while being reaffirmed by his best friend. This was the story about how he'd become the greatest hero in the world. Rebecca's cat yawned upon her bed as she lied there in a daze, arms folded behind her head, while wearing a white tank top and short shorts. After meeting All Might and witnessing him tell Izuku that he could become a hero, her whole world turned upside down when the number one hero said he could give her best friend his power. His quirk was called One for All, a sacred power that had been passed from generation to generation. It was something that had been cultivated and made powerful from the passage of time, being improved from wielder to the next. When Izuku asked why he was picked to take it next, All Might told him that he had been searching for a worthy successor. After seeing how the quirkless boy had rushed into action when the rest of the heroes stood idly by, he knew he was worthy. In spite of his tears, Izuku accepted the offer. Huh. Rebecca sighed as she sat up from her bed. She heard Happy yawn again, prompting her to smile as she petted him. After everything that had happened today, she had been trusted to keep a very big secret. She pulled out her phone and immediately opened her messages, readying one for Izuku. Becca. What a day, huh? Izu. Yeah, definitely. Sorry for scaring you back there. Becca, you didn't know I was there. I can let it slide. For now. Izu, what'll it cost me? Becca, dinner at her place. And Mario Party. Izu, sounds good. Becca, so. Training with All Might. Izu, yeah. It feels so surreal. 1 minute, I almost died. The next, I'm about to train with the world's greatest hero. Becca, I get what you mean. So much for being the first quirkless hero then. Izuku didn't reply for a moment, much to Rebecca's concern as she frowned sadly. She must have reminded him of how she encouraged him to be a hero, even without a quirk. With a sigh, she quickly typed on her phone. Becca, sorry. That was uncalled for. Izu. No, it's okay. I just had to think about that for a sec. Thank you. Huh? Rebecca uttered in confusion as she blinked. What was he thanking her for? Becca. W'd him. Izu. All this time, I think you were the person that really kept me going. It wasn't All Might or my mom. It was you. So thank you, Rebecca. Seeing those words on her phone screen, the Leaper Quirk user smiled brightly. She was glad that her presence and words helped her best friend throughout the years he was quirkless. And now he was going to get a quirk. Well, so long as he could handle it. Becca, how come him didn't give you the quirk? Izu. He told me to come by Dagaba Beach tomorrow. I think he'll explain then. Becca, ID come. But I'm tied up with work and happy. Izu, that's okay. Let's just keep this between ourselves. Becca, you got it. Night, Izuku. Izu, good night, Rebecca. Thank you so much. With that, the Leaper Quirk user set aside her phone and picked up her tired cat, who purred as she petted him again. She was a little worried about how well Izuku would do with All Might's power. But if he could become as strong as him, she wouldn't have to worry. She just didn't want him to wind up as buff as the #1 hero. Huh. Rebecca exhaled, wiping the sweat off of her brow before putting her hair into a ponytail. After a long morning of courier work and receiving plenty of generous tips for her quickness in deliveries, she now had a lot of free time to start training for the UA exam in 10 months. She'd done a lot of running around with Leaper, so it was nice to just go for a smooth jog. It was especially nice to wear sneaker and not her sandals again. She hated getting blisters on her toes. As her jog began, she remembered where Izuku had told her he'd be training with All Might. With a smile crossing her face, she changed course and headed off towards the beach. Upon arriving, she was amazed to find the huge amount of trash piled about on the coast. But as she inspected it closely, she spotted her best friend and smiled. Izuku, hey, she called out, causing him to shiver in surprise, while All Might spat up blood out of shock. They looked over to see her hurry down the steps and jog over to them. Ah, young Blue Garden, the #1 hero greeted. Come to check up on your friend, he guessed, putting his hands onto his hips. Yeah. The Leaper Quirk user replied with a chuckle. So what's your training supposed to be, Izuku? She asked of the freckled boy beside her, turning to him. He stammered for a moment, having noticed that Rebecca was only wearing a black sports bra with sweatpants. He turned to the side, wrapping his reddening head in his arms as she blinked in confusion. He started to say. A moment after he explained. You're cleaning up the whole beach? Rebecca exclaimed, quite stunned. Yeah. The quirkless boy answered. It's going to be a lot of work. But I'm ready to shoot for the moon, he declared with a determined smile. In spite of how nervous he looked, Rebecca grinned at his confidence. Then I will, too, she vowed, holding up clenched fists. If you're going plus ultra, I can't fall behind, she pointed out seriously. Seeing that look on her face made All Might grin. He remembered that she had leapt in just like Izuku to save Katsuki from the sludge villain. Young Blue Garden, he chimed in, catching her attention. You're aiming for Yua as well, he guessed. Yep, she answered with a nod. I know you and a lot of great pros graduated from there. So I'm giving it my best shot alongside Izuku, she declared. And what might your quirk be? All Might asked curiously. Rebecca blinked. Oh, hold on a sec, she requested, quickly taking off her shoes and socks, stuffing the latter pair into the former. She rolled up her pant legs to her knees and took on a lunging stance, letting her markings appear upon her legs. My quirk's called Leaper, she said. It lets me run super fast, she mentioned. So an ether type, HM. The number one hero noted as his hand was upon his chin. He then flashed a thumbs up. Do your best as well, young Blue Garden, he advised of her. I will, she assured in response with a nod. A long while later, after mingling around the beach, she continued her jog and returned home. Happy meowed in greeting, making her smile. But then she noticed a box atop the kitchen counter with a small note attached to it. She walked over and picked it up to read it. To my little Blue Garden. Aim for the stars and beyond with these. And good luck on the exam. Which came by, she questioned aloud, glancing about her apartment. She then lifted the top of the box up and gasped a little in surprise. Inside were a pair of blue sports sandals. Her eyes shimmered with excitement. She was ready to get through 10 months of training. All Might made you do that? Rebecca inquired to Izuku as they were walking together past Yua High's front gate. She had just heard the amazing story of how he managed to finish clearing the coastline of Dagaba Beach with moments to spare, now prepared to inherit the number one hero's power. The only was how he inherited it. He told me I had to ingest some of his DNA. The freckled boy confirmed. The Leaper quirk user paled and shuddered. Tell me he at least gave you some water to wash it down, she pleaded to him. His quivering lips answered for him. Oh, wow, Rebecca uttered out, continuing along the path with him. Do you feel any different? She asked of her best friend. No, not yet, he replied, putting his right hand over his mouth. Stupid Deku. A familiar voice grumbled out, getting their attentions as they saw Katsuki trotting up to them while wearing a scarf around his neck. Kaken, Izuku uttered in surprise. Quickly, Rebecca stepped out in front of him in a defensive manner. Don't you dare try anything, she warned, narrowing her eyes onto the explosion quirk user. Tesk, he scoffed. Just get out of my face before I set you both on fire, he threatened, trudging past them. Both Izuku and Rebecca were surprised. He was still foul-mouthed as usual, but he also wasn't as aggressive towards his classmates. Well, we should get going, the Leaper quirk user insisted. Why, yeah, Izuku stuttered out in reply with a nod. He was ready to take his first steps forward to becoming a hero. And then he tripped. Ah, Izu, Rebecca halted her yelp as she saw her best friend float in place. She noticed that there was a girl beside him with brown hair and pink cheeks. She let out a giggle. Are you okay? She asked of Izuku. He yelped in surprise, flailing about. The brown-haired girl helped him stand back up on the brick walkway, clapping her hands together. I stopped you with my quirk, she pointed out. I'm sorry I didn't ask first, she apologized with a smile. But I figured you wouldn't mind me catching you, she noted additionally. Izuku was practically frozen with how the girl was casually talking to him. Oh, thanks so much, Rebecca chimed in as she came over. No problem, the brown-haired girl responded with a smile. Huh. She exhaled. Isn't this all like way nerve-wracking? She asked of the pair of Aldera junior high students. Oh, totally. The Leaper quirk user agreed. You think so too, right, Izuku? She asked of her friend. Yeah, he stammered in agreement. Well, I guess I'll see you two inside, the brown-haired girl confirmed after a moment. Bye, she called out in farewell with a wave. See you later, Rebecca yelled back. She then glanced over to Izuku, who still seemed stunned by the interaction. Is that the first time you talked to a girl that wasn't me? She guessed with a grin, raising an eyebrow. Embarrassed, the freckled teen hid his reddening face in his arms as his friend giggled. A while later, they were receiving the rules for the practical portion of the exam from President Mike along with every other student applying. It was seemingly simple. Participants were to take out bots in the area they'd be put into, earning points based on the type of machine they took down. At one point, there was a very serious student with dark blue hair and glasses that pointed out a fourth type of robot on the printout sheet for the examinees. He also went ahead to single out Izuku for muttering during the lecture. He meekly apologized, covering his mouth with his hands. Sitting next to him and hearing the laughter of some students around them, Rebecca gave off an annoyed look. "He's just nervous like a lot of us," she pointed out. "Leave him alone," she insisted defensively to the spectacled teen's surprise. After that, he sat back down, allowing for President Mike to continue the lecture. "Thanks," Izuku whispered to Rebecca gratefully. She smiled. "Anytime," she assured in response. They were going to do whatever they could to pass the exam and get into UA. "Keep it together, Rebecca," the Leaper Quirk user begged of herself, smacking her cheeks with her hands as she wore her blue sports bra and sweatpants, while having her hair in a ponytail as she approached the group of UA hopefuls outside of the battle center. She was in C. She remembered that Izuku had A, while Katsuki had B. UA must have looked into applications and made sure no two students from the same school were grouped together. She guessed, recalling what Katsuki had inferred earlier when they had gotten their cards to their designated battle centers. The people surrounding her were varied in all sorts of ways. There was one girl whose earlobes looked like headphone cables, one boy who had thick lips, and another boy that appeared to have purple grapes for hair. Rebecca blinked twice before shaking her head and taking a deep breath to recompose herself. She looked down at her new sports sandals, excited to use them. "Which?" she uttered inwardly. "I swear, I'll do my best," she vowed through her thoughts, giving off a determined smile. "Hey, do you want to be my friend?" a voice suddenly exclaimed from afar, piquing her attention as she turned to her left. There was an eager-looking boy greeting everyone around. He was a lean, toned young man of average height with spiky black hair, which partially covered his ears, slanted dark eyes, and thin eyebrows. He donned a small, white bandage on his left cheek as well as a red pouch around his waist. His attire consisted of a high-collared, red and black open jacket with the sleeves rolled up to his forearms, pockets on either side of the chest, and two black laces attached to the neck of his jacket hanging behind his head. Underneath, he wore a simple white shirt with a V-neck collar and a red design on the front, which patterned out into a Y shape. He also sported baggy, green-colored trousers which possessed a noticeable white detail on both sides. Lastly, his choice of footwear was a pair of simple, black boots. Rebecca blinked as she saw him zip from person to person, asking the same exact question of wanting to be friends. It seemed really childish in a way, but also kind of adorable. He then approached her. "Hi, I'm Shiki," he introduced in greeting, causing her to yelp in surprise. "Do you want to be my friend?" he asked, holding his right hand out to her expectantly. Can I get a rain check on that offer?" she requested, holding out her hands and waving them. "We are about to take a big exam," she pointed out seriously. "Oh, sure," the spiky-haired boy replied. "Good luck," he called out before running off. Rebecca gave off a small smile. Meeting someone nice as him was welcome after all the hatred from Katsuki and company back in middle school. At that moment, a horn went off. "Oh, shoot," she yelped in realization. She activated her quirk as her wing-like markings appeared upon her legs. Dashing forward, she raced past several of the competitors into the battle center. "Izuku, I'll see you at the finish line," she promised inwardly. Things had proven to be a lot tougher than Rebecca thought they'd be. For one, the robots themselves were pretty sturdy. It took at least quite a few kicks to down one, and she hadn't downed many. Huh, huh. She breathed out tiredly, putting her hands onto her knees. She hadn't kept track of points either, though she'd only been dealing with 1-pointers for the time being. She needed to find some 2s or 3s soon. Otherwise, she'd lose. Smacking her cheeks to regain her focus, she sped hurriedly around the fake city. And as she veered a corner, she found a 2-pointer, about to ambush the girl with the cable-like earlobes from behind. Much like how she reacted when trying to save Katsuki from the sludge villain, she sped over without thinking. "Watch out!" she screamed. The dark purple-haired girl found herself tackled aside by the leaper quirk user, just before she could wind up struck by the robot, as it hit the pavement instead. They tumbled along the sidewalk before sitting up, seeing the 2-pointer coming towards them. "I got it," the dark purple-haired girl exclaimed, having her cable-like earlobes extend and pierce into the robot's metal. It suddenly stopped, sparking as it fell down and began smoking. "Huh." The dark purple-haired girl sighed in relief. "Can't believe I couldn't hear it coming," she muttered out. "Thanks," she said in gratitude to Rebecca, who stood up. "No problem," she responded, hurrying off. "Good luck the rest of the way," she called out in farewell. The dark purple-haired girl watched her head off curiously. She hurried through the streets, using her momentum to kick down more 1- and 2-pointer bots. Even so, she had a feeling she wasn't getting enough points, and time was starting to run short. By now, I bet Izuku's already got a lot of points with All Might's quirk, she noted to herself, and Kaken, too. She muttered through her thoughts out of frustration. "Ha!" Katsuki laughed after blowing up another 3-pointer. He was on a roll. As others were running away from the larger targets, he was closing in and blasting them apart with ease. Seemingly nothing could ruin the fun he was having with such an overwhelming sense of pride and victory. More 3-pointers closed in on him. A wicked grin graced his face as he was ready to send them sky high. But all of a sudden, the robots were all slashed instantaneously, coming apart in half. The explosion quirk user widened his eyes and clenched his teeth together in disbelief. He looked to see that the culprit was a slim young woman with dark brown eyes, long, navy blue hair, and a beauty mark located under her left eye. Her hair reached to her waist and part of it was tied in a high ponytail with a yellow ribbon. She was very well endowed and had a curvaceous figure. "Apologies for intruding on your entertainment," she remarked over to Katsuki, who blinked in surprise. "But my blades lust for enemies to cut down," she declared. In her hands were a pair of glowing red blades. Her arms had glowing red markings. The explosion quirk user gnashed his teeth together. "Who the hell is this chick supposed to be?" he questioned inwardly out of anger. "Oh crap," a blonde-haired boy with a large tail yelped, about to be swiped at by a 1-pointer robot. But all of a sudden, it came apart entirely, with its pieces falling onto the ground. "Huh," the tailed boy uttered in confusion as he blinked. "Ha." A voice chuckled out. "That makes a good 55 for me," he remarked. Stepping out from an alleyway was a tall young man with a slim build, dark eyes and short, messy blonde hair. For clothes, he wore a dark-colored shirt and a pair of light-colored jeans and shoes. Yellow markings glowed upon his right arm. "Since these are all bots, this thing's gonna be mine for the taking," he declared confidently, while the tailed boy stared at him in awe. "Darn it. I'm nowhere near close to a decent score," Rebecca realized as she grimaced, as a 1-minute warning from Present Mike had just gone off. She could only take down so many 1-pointers. And with time running short, she couldn't find any 2s or 3s around. In fact, she could see many people fleeing the area. What's going on? She wondered inwardly. She then felt a rumble in the ground. "Huh," she uttered out. Turning to her right, she widened her eyes in disbelief. Nearby was a giant robot, bigger than all of the rest. "Ah!" she shrieked in shock, raising her arms up. Why the hell is Yua making us compete with such crazy things? She inquired through her thoughts. She knew that it was a zero-pointer based on all the other robots she had seen, so there was no point in fighting it. But just as she started to leave, she took notice of something flying up towards the giant robot. It was the boy she had met earlier, Shiki. What is he doing? She wondered. He was grinning from ear to ear as he clenched his right fist, with bright green markings adorning his arm. Majimich attack. He began to bellow, throwing his fist out. Gravity fist, he roared, landing a power-packed punch to the robot's head. And from just the sheer force of the blow, the zero-pointer was shattered as it started to fall over, with pieces of it falling toward the ground below. Rebecca's mouth gaped wide open. Not only did Shiki attack a zero-pointer all by himself, he took it out in one single hit. Ah, help! A voice screamed, snapping the Leaper quirk user out of her stupor as she looked to see quite a few people about to hit by the falling debris of the robot. Again without thinking, Rebecca hurried over and brought them to safety. The last person she grabbed in the nick of time was the boy with grape-like hair. She held him under her armpit as she narrowly evaded getting crushed by the falling metal. Huh. She exhaled in relief. However, she then felt something nudge against her chest. She looked down to see that it was the boy in her arm nuzzling against her, as he had a perverted smile on his face. Oh, this is heaven, he huskily remarked. A heavy blush came across Rebecca's face before she growled. You sick ducky, she screamed angrily, tossing the perverted boy onto the ground. After that, the horn sounded off. She blinked before sighing in realization. The test was over. Izuku was in a daze for days. He might have passed the written test of the entrance exam, but it wouldn't matter in his mind after he didn't earn a single point during the practical portion. All he did was punch a zero-pointer, breaking his right arm and both of his legs. And now he was left waiting for the results to come back. There was a knock at the door. Oh, I'll get it, Inko called out. Her son was barely paying attention, focusing on flexing his fingers and curling his biceps. All Might had trusted him with his power, and he felt like he failed. But even more than that, he felt like he failed Rebecca. She was the person who encouraged him to strive to be the hero he could be under All Might's tutelage. She wanted to go plus ultra like him. He only hoped that she got into Yua. Izuku, his mother suddenly exclaimed, causing him to turn and see her burst the door to the living room open. He was surprised to find her, and Rebecca there. The Leaper quirk user had 2 envelopes in her hand, both with a Yua seal. Saved the best for last, she remarked with a giggle. Moments later, the 2 of them were inside Izuku's room, both sitting at the desk as their results sat before them. Only the lamp in the room illuminated their surroundings. You really haven't changed your room all that much since we were kids, Rebecca pointed out. I remember when I'd used to come over for sleepovers, she recalled. Yeah, Izuku said, staring at the envelopes on the desk. The Leaper quirk user looked to him worriedly. She placed a hand onto his shoulder. Hey, she uttered, getting his attention. Do you want to open yours first? She offered, giving him a soft smile. He glanced back at the envelopes. Deciding to just rip off the metaphorical bandage once for all, he grabbed his letter and tore it open. The only thing inside that clattered onto the desk was a small, disc-shaped object, which immediately projected a holographic screen. Booyah! All Might exclaimed as his face was front and center on the screen. I am here as a projection, he declared proudly with his trademark smile. Both Izuku and Rebecca were stunned. They learned that the #1 hero was now going to be a faculty member of UA, and as he started to go into the results, the freckled boy tensed up. He passed the written test, but didn't get any points during the practical. Or so it seemed. All Might then showed a video of the pink-cheeked girl who they had met the day of the exam. She had gone to present Mike afterwards and asked if she could give Izuku some of her points, since he'd spent his time saving her from the zero-pointer. Hearing that, Rebecca blinked in surprise. You stopped the zero-pointer to save her? She inquired of her best friend. He merely nodded. And then they learned another surprising fact. Present Mike assured for the girl not to worry. Why? Because there was another method of obtaining merit in the practical. Rescue points. And Izuku scored 60 of them. The girl named Ochako Uraraka scored 45. They both passed. Is this really happening? Izuku wondered aloud as his eyes shimmered and his lips quivered. I think it is. Rebecca replied as tears of joy were pricking her eyes. She had seen that she gained 48 rescue points of her own, placing her above Ochako in the standings with 65 total. Welcome, Izuku, All Might said. You are now part of the Hero Academia, he declared to his pupil. He whimpered as tears welled in his eyes. But he was beyond grateful. Thanks, he cried out, wiping his eyes afterwards. Rebecca smiled, happy for him. Betting I got the same kind of message from All Might, too, she noted, ripping open her letter to find a holo projector as well. Only the person that appeared upon the screen wasn't the number one hero. It was a tall, well-endowed woman with a slender, voluptuous figure. She had long green hair that was braided and wore a black dress along with a visor that covered her eyes and had E4 etched on it. The dress she wore had yellow stripes with a deep cut in the back, exposing her back, gray sleeves, and a heart-shaped cut in the chest, exposing her cleavage. Hello, Rebecca, she greeted. It's been a while, she remarked with a soft smile. Which? The Leaper Quirk user stammered out in surprise. That's which regret, Izuku exclaimed. One of the 4 shining star heroes, he mentioned in shock. Before I get into the details of your results, I'll say congratulations, the woman said over the projected recording. You passed the exam and will join the hero course this coming semester, she told Rebecca, who smiled brightly as her eyes shimmered. We both got in, she exclaimed excitedly, reaching over to hug Izuku, who yelped in surprise. However, he chuckled, embracing her back warmly. Yeah, he said with a grin. We're both in, he noted with underlying happiness in his tone. This was the true start for the two of them. And what a start it would be. Just as Izuku had gotten his shoes on and opened the door, he was shocked to find Rebecca there in her UA uniform. In his life, she was the only girl he really got to interact with from childhood up to now. And the thought that she was a really pretty girl never really occurred to him. Until now. Morning, Izuku, she greeted, holding onto the strap of her blue book bag. Excited for the first day? She asked with a bright smile on her face. I. He tried to say, freezing up as his cheeks turned a rosy red. Hello, Rebecca, Inko greeted in a stutter. You look so pretty in your uniform, she complimented. The Leaper Quirk user giggled. Thanks, she responded gratefully. What do you think, Izuku? She asked of her best friend, who blinked in surprise as he was snapped away from his stupor. Why you look are really pretty. He managed to stammer out as his entire face reddened before he turned away, wrapping his arms around his head. Rebecca smiled warmly at him. And you look great, too, she assured to him, causing him to turn to her with an astonished look of awe. Oh, let's get a picture, she insisted, taking out her phone and handing it off to Inko. Wah? Izuku yelped in shock, only to squeak meekly as his best friend wrapped her arm around his shoulders, pulling him in close. She posed for the camera, winking with a grin. The one for all inheritor was stiff for a moment, but relaxed as he saw Rebecca's face. He smiled a little, and his mother took the picture as a bright flash went off. Oh, I can't believe my baby's going to UA, she admitted, starting to tear up. I'm so proud of you, Izuku, she added happily. Her son was seemingly surprised by her words, but he smiled back. Thanks, Mom, he said in gratitude. We'll see you later, he called out, waving goodbye before he left through the door with Rebecca by his side. She stared over at him curiously, getting his attention. What? He stuttered in question, blushing a little. No idea how to tie a tie, huh? She guessed. He blinked in surprise, looking at how bunched together his tie was. It was more like an ascot than a tie. Huh. He sighed out as the Leaper Quirk user giggled. Nevertheless, today was a monumental day. This was the true start of their hero journey. It's huge, Rebecca noted as she and Izuku stood just outside of the door to Class 1A. They were about 5 minutes early before the first bell rang. As the Leaper Quirk user was about to open the door, she noticed how apprehensive her friend seemed. "You okay?" she asked him out of concern. "I just thought that maybe Kaken or that guy with the glasses would be in this class," he answered meekly. "Oh," Rebecca uttered in realization, also dreading the thought of the bombastic Katsuki and the seemingly strict, spectacled young man they had met. The thought of him being in the same class made her shudder a little. "We were probably in different classes," she stuttered reassuringly. "Now come on," she beckoned, putting her hand onto the door to slide it open. "Can't keep everyone waiting," she proclaimed. "But as luck would have it, take your feet off that desk now," the spectacled man insisted of Katsuki, who gave off a smug grin. Both Izuku and Rebecca sighed. "Just our luck," they thought simultaneously. "Hey!" a familiar voice called out, catching the Leaper Quirk user's attention as she took notice of the dark purple-haired girl she had helped save during the exam. "Oh, hi," she greeted with a wave. "Good to see." Her excitement faded when she noticed another person near the back of the room. It was the lecherous boy who had nuzzled his head against her breast. He looked excited to see her. She didn't. "You," she growled, glaring daggers at the boy, who started sweating madly. "Hey, I remember you," another familiar voice chimed in, snapping her out of her angered state as she looked to see Shiki hop over. "Guess you passed after all," he pointed out excitedly. "That's great," he added with a big grin. Yeah," Rebecca agreed as she nodded. "It was Shiki, right?" she inquired, receiving a nod in response from the spiky-haired boy. "Shiki Granbell," he introduced. "So do you want to be my friend?" he asked excitedly, recalling their interaction before the exam. "Well, I guess I did owe you an answer," the Leaper Quirk user realized as she shrugged. "Okay, sure," she confirmed. "My name's Rebecca Bluegarden, by the way," she introduced, holding her right hand out. "All right," Shiki exclaimed loudly to her surprise as well as Izuku's. "Hey, you want to be my friend, too?" he asked of the one-for-all inheritor. Uh, um, he stammered out, quite taken aback by the sudden proposition of being friends with a guy he had only just met 3 seconds ago. The spectacled young man known as Tenya came over and introduced himself, complimenting Izuku for knowing the exact requirements necessary for the exam, though it really was just dumb luck that things turned out the way they did. Same for Rebecca. "Hey, I recognize that messed up hair. It's Falling Boy," a familiar voice greeted, catching the group's attention as they turned to see Ochako at the doorway. She complimented Izuku as well, and he broke out into an embarrassed blush, thanking her for what she had done when she offered to give him some of her points from the practical exam. He seemed a little uncomfortable, but with Rebecca standing beside him, he was at least able to talk and laugh amongst some new friends. Meanwhile, Katsuki glared over at them, with anger building in his eyes. Rebecca getting into Yua was one thing since she had a quirk. But Izuku, "You seem to be staring intensely at them," the blue-haired girl commented, catching his attention as he looked to see her sitting a couple seats across from him. "Huh," he uttered out, now turning his glare onto her. "Sorry," she apologized. "I have a bad habit of speaking my mind," she noted. Katsuki scoffed, turning away. "Like I care," he muttered out. He remembered when he received his final score results from the exam. There was just one person who wound up ahead of him. And it was the very girl he saw slashing up robots in the battle center sitting across from him. Her name was Homura Kochitsu. After I destroy those two, she's next. He vowed inwardly. So what do you think we're doing for orientation? Ochako asked. Who knows? Rebecca responded, sheepishly scratching at her right cheek. Well, until we do. Another voice began, belonging to the blonde-haired young man approaching them. We should take this time to get to know each other, he insisted, draping his left arm over the Leaper Quirk user's shoulders. Your name's Rebecca, right? He guessed of her. She arched an eyebrow in annoyance. Meanwhile, Izuku tensed up. An uncomfortable feeling was bubbling up inside of him. But it wasn't rage. Who are you supposed to be? Rebecca inquired blankly. Weiss Steiner, the next number one after All Might. The blonde-haired young man declared in reply. The Leaper Quirk user rolled her eyes. If you're just here to make friends, then you can pack up your stuff now, a voice suddenly stated. Everyone perked up, turning to the source. It was a tired-looking man with shaggy black hair and stubble, lying in a yellow sleeping bag. Everyone was shocked. Bougie, Shiki suddenly screamed, hiding behind Tenya and whimpering. G. Granbell, what are you doing? The spectacled teen inquired. That's no insect, he pointed out emphatically. It turned out the unkempt man was their teacher, and he advised the students to put on their pea clothes before heading outside. A quirk assessment test? Rebecca inquired, wearing her hair in a ponytail as she and the other 23 students were dressed in their gym uniforms while outside on the dirt field. Their teacher was having them perform standardized tests, but with the use of quirks permitted. As a demonstration, he had Katsuki do a ball throw. Go to hell, he roared, throwing as hard as he could with an explosion, blasting the ball into the air. Oh, whoa, Izuku uttered out. Still as explosive as ever. Rebecca grumbled, putting her hands onto her hips. Katsuki's throw had gone 715.2 meters. And with that, the assessment tests began. Rebecca noticed how Izuku didn't seem to be using his quirk. But after he explained what had happened during the exam when he took out the 0-pointer, she understood plenty. She got ready for the 50-meter dash, competing against the dark purple-haired girl. Name's Kyoka, by the way, she remarked to her opponent in a whisper. Rebecca, she quietly introduced in reply. Good luck, she added before they were signaled to start. Activating her quirk, Rebecca sped forward. She managed to reach the finish line in 3.2 seconds, just barely missing beating Tenya's score. Hey, you want to be friends after this? Shiki asked Ochako, as they took their stances at the start line. Sure, I guess, she replied with a nervous smile afterwards. Rebecca and Izuku both watched as the glowing green lines appeared upon Shiki's body, much to their surprise. Shiki Granbell, quirk, Satan gravity. He's got an ether-type power that lets him manipulate gravitational forces, even around himself. But like other ether-type quirks, it can get used up really quick. Everyone watched as Shiki floated up from the ground. When the signal went off, he basically fell sideways to the finish line in 3.26 seconds. His classmates were shocked. Looks like we've got some stiff competition, Rebecca realized, grimacing a little. Next was the grip strength test. Amongst the girls, Homura came away with the strongest result. For the boys, it was Shiki, as he broke the machine. Whoops, he uttered afterwards as everyone stared at him in disbelief. He was acing pretty much all of the tests. And in the meantime, Izuku was struggling to even attempt to use his power. He was trying his hardest, but he kept imagining his broken self at the end of the entrance exam. It came to the point where he hadn't made a significant impression up to the ball throw. He was left watching as Ochako threw her ball, earning herself a score of infinity. Shiki followed up with his own score that matched hers, having launched his ball into the air like a comet. Izuku stared at him in wonder. He was so strong and powerful. He could have easily been the next All Might. Rebecca noticed how discouraged he seemed. Hey, Izuku, she whispered, getting his attention. You've got this, she assured to him with an encouraging wink. He smiled a little. He didn't want to let her down. He didn't want to let his mother down. He didn't want to let All Might down. The power of One for All surged through his right arm before he reared it back. And through 46 meters. The measuring robot exclaimed. Izuku paled. Rebecca gasped lightly. It turned out that their teacher was Shota Aizawa, also known as the Hero Eraser Head. His quirk allowed him to temporarily erase a power while he had his eyes fixed on someone. And he erased Izuku's because he was going to sacrifice his own arm to make a statement. He told him that he wouldn't be a hero if he would break down after just one attack. So with that, the One for All inheritor had to think. He had a long way to go in gaining control of his power. So I'll focus on what I can do right now, he declared inwardly, rearing his arm back again with the ball in his hand. This time, he channeled his power into the tip of his index finger and threw as hard as he could. And as he did, he yelled out, launching the ball into the air thanks to the force added from his fingertip, sending it high into the air as everyone watched in awe. Rebecca smiled widely at the sight. I knew he could do it, she noted to herself. His throw had gone 715.3 meters, further than Katsuki's. He turned around to Shota and faced him, forcing a grin while closing his right hand into a fist. Mr. Aizawa. He began in spite of all the pain. I'm still standing, he declared. The erasure quirk user grinned. This kid, he uttered out. Watching from afar were All Might and Witch, who both smiled at the sight. This was a huge opportunity for the new student heroes, and they were going to do their best to help raise them. Everyone was left astonished as Izuku cradled his broken finger. He had just scored the third highest mark in the ball throw, passing Katsuki by 1/10 of a meter. Rebecca's big smile toward him made him weakly grin back. He had done it, and all while keeping himself able to move. At least, until the explosion quirk user rushed out at him. Deku, you bastard, he roared. You're gonna tell me how you did that, or you're dead, he bellowed angrily in demand. Ah! The One for All inheritor shrieked, about to endure a bombardment of blasts from his rival. Or so he thought. Without warning, Shiki rushed in and grabbed Katsuki by his arm, making him float up as he held onto him. Hey, put me down, he roared, letting off blasts threateningly. The Satan gravity quirk user glared up at him. Don't hurt my friend, he said simply. Katsuki was about to blast Shiki instead for getting in his way. But suddenly, he fell down on top of him as they both collapsed onto the ground. Sheesh, Shota muttered as his red eyes glared at them. Don't make me use my quirk so much, he insisted firmly. Sorry. Shiki apologized, sitting up and rubbing the back of his head sheepishly. Rebecca then went over to check on Izuku, with Katsuki glaring at him from afar with shaking eyes of anger. He had thought that the freckled boy was nothing more than a bug he could have easily squashed into the ground. So seeing him do what he could with just his finger enraged him. The next 2 tests went by quickly before everyone gathered for the results. Some looked nervous, while others appeared to be relaxed. Izuku was one of the nervous ones. Shota had said that the student who placed last on the test would be immediately expelled. He brought up the list of students. Shiki Granbell, Momo Yaoyorozu, Shoto Todoroki, Homura Kochsu, Katsuki Bakugo, Tenya Ida, Rebecca Bluegarden, Fumikage, Tokoyami, Mizo Shoji, Mashirawa, Jiraijiro Kirishima, Mina Ashido, Ochako, Uraraka Koji, Koda, Rikido, Sato, Tsuyu, Asui, Yuga, Aoyama, Hantasiro, Denki, Kaminari, Izuku, Midoriya, Kyoka, Jiro, Toru, Hagakure, Minoru, Mineta, Weiss, Steiner. Huh? Weiss exclaimed upon spotting his name at the very bottom of the list. Hey, I aced that damn grip test, he pointed out. Don't think I didn't see you cheat on that, Steiner, Shota remarked to the blonde-haired teen. We're allowed to use quirks, aren't we? He yelled back in question. Meanwhile, Izuku sighed with relief to find that he wasn't at the bottom of the list. Rebecca came over and put a hand onto his shoulder. Way to go, she whispered to him with a smile. Thanks, he quietly said in gratitude, giving her a nod. As it turned out, Shota admitted that the notice of expulsion was a logical deception to make everyone give it their all during the tests. Nonetheless, Izuku didn't care. He was pretty close to the bottom, so now it was his goal to make his way back up. How's the finger? Rebecca asked after school, walking alongside her best friend. Better, thanks to Recovery Girl, he pointed out, holding up his once broken finger. Did you know that Sister Ivry works in the nurse's office, too? He inquired of the Leaper quirk user, who gasped in surprise. Whoa, really? She exclaimed, taking a moment to imagine the shining star hero. She was a slim, well-endowed young woman with blue eyes, gray eyebrows, and long, white hair and eyelashes. Her main attire was a long-sleeved black nun's habit with E2 on the headpiece and knee-length brown boots. Kinda figures if witches in this school, she pointed out with a grin. Guess that would mean Hermit Mio would be here, too, Izuku added. And maybe Valkyrie Yuna if she wasn't. Hey, a voice called out, snapping the two away from their conversation as they looked to see Shiki running towards them, carrying a big red backpack. Wanna go home together? He offered to his two new friends. Oh, Shiki, Rebecca yelped in surprise, seeing the Satan gravity quirk user screech to a halt in front of her and Izuku. Sure, I guess, she answered a bit unsurely. Where do you? Midoriya, Blue Garden, Granbell, Tenya's voice yelled, interrupting the Leaper quirk user as she saw him come over as well. And soon after him, Ochako arrived. They mingled for a bit, with the zero-gravity quirk commenting on how Izuku's nickname of Deku could make a great hero name. And not to mention, it sounded cute to her. Deku it is, he exclaimed suddenly. Just like that? Tenya inquired aloud. Weren't you saying that it was an insult? He asked on. You know, I think that's a great idea, Rebecca admitted, getting her best friend's attention. If you wear that nickname with pride, then it'll lose that meaning Kaken gave it, she pointed out. Deku the hero sounds good to me, she exclaimed as she winked. Unlike before when Ochako called his nickname cute, and he blushed with embarrassment, Izuku went red because of how sincere and sweet his best friend was being. Thanks, Rebecca, he stuttered in gratitude. And with that, he walked off with her and their three new friends from school. Though today hadn't been easy, their real test wouldn't begin until tomorrow. Hello, everyone, which greeted the next day in the class one a classroom, bowing to the students. I'm sure you're all curious to know what one of the shining star heroes is doing here today, she noted, putting up her right pointer finger. Today, I'd like for us to go over a current topic that I'm sure will interest many of you, she told the class. Who would like to tell me about the appearance of ether-type quirks? She asked curiously. Immediately, a few hands went up. Yes, Sir Izuku, which said to the freckled boy, who put his hand down. Ether-type quirks were discovered almost 50 years ago, when a hero known as Mother harnessed a power known as ether, manifesting it with her own stockpiling quirk to create a power she desired, he explained in reply. Correct, Witch responded. And I know that a few of you are ether-type quirk users, she mentioned, glancing about the room. So would any of you like to continue, she offered. Only one hand went up. It was Homura's. There was an incident in which Mother's ether was taken and implanted into other humans, some of which didn't even have quirks, she told her. Children born from those people developed powers that would be classified as ether types due to their similarities, she explained on. Thus, you and the other shining star heroes came into existence, along with several villains such as those from the Oration Says of the olden days. She mentioned, narrowing her eyes for a moment. That is quite correct as well, Lady Homura, which said in a complimentary tone. Nowadays, Ether-type quirks can be easily determined based upon the markings that usually upon a user, she noted. But before then, it was not so easily determinable, she pointed out, holding out her hands. The right had electricity sparking off of it, while the left formed ice. Most of the students gasped in surprise. My quirk allows me to manifest my ether in various forms, the Shining Star Hero told them. Hence my title, she added. Shining Star Hero, which regret. Quirk. Sorcery. She can channel the ether in her body to call upon all kinds of ways, including lightning, ice, water, fire, and many more. Watch out that you don't end up on the wrong end of a fight against her. She's been said to have never lost a battle. HMPH, Katsuki scoffed, looking quite bored. Is there a way for us ether types to increase our ether stores? Rebecca inquired. I know that some of us burn through it pretty quick. She recalled, glancing over toward Shiki, who teared up a little with gratitude. Of course, Lady Rebecca, which replied. Ether types can be strengthened by constant training and determination, she assured to her and the others. And I have a good feeling that you will all go beyond my level back in the day, she mentioned with confidence. Now I believe you're all about to take part in your first round of hero training today, she noted. I wish you all the best of luck, she said with a polite bow. She's so courteous. Everyone in the classroom inwardly noted. Izuku felt his lips tremble with excitement. The first day of hero training was upon him and his friends, and he felt that he was ready. Izuku was so not ready. Seeing Ochako in her bodysuit was trouble enough for him to handle. But then Rebecca arrived at the training ground. She wore a black and white, skin-tight jumpsuit that went down to just below her knees, exposing her legs enough as sports sandals adorned her feet. She also had a cat-like tail and cat-like ears. What do you think, Izuku? She asked, posing cutely. I. He stammered out, keeping his eyes locked onto her. How a girl like Rebecca could be so cute and sexy at the same time, he would never know. Deku, Ochako chimed in. You're bleeding, she pointed out. Huh, he uttered, looking himself over. And then he blushed upon realizing where exactly he was bleeding from. He took off his gas mask and quickly wiped his bloody nose. Rebecca chuckled, somewhat flattered that she had managed to get Izuku all embarrassed. After all the time they had spent together, she imagined that he would have gotten nervous around her sooner. She then took notice of a staring Minoru, who drooled at the sight of her. She responded by kicking him away, much to everyone's surprise. All right, Shiki exclaimed as he leapt out and landed amongst the others. I'm ready to do this hero stuff, he declared. His costume was a buttoned-up, short-sleeved, and copper-trimmed black tunic with an open high collar, having 2 black laces behind the neck of the collar, white round details on the sides, and a zigzag pattern at the end of the sleeves on either side. He also wore a pair of brown goggles over his forehead, sporting a pair of white baggy trousers with a single line going down in the middle and tucked into black and copper boots. Geez, Weiss grumbled, walking out alongside Hamura. His own hero costume was a mid-sleeved jumpsuit with a chest plate and shoulder pads connected, and held by a leather belt with a pocket on the left. He also carried what looked like a silver assault rifle. Beside him, Hamura was dressed in a sleeveless, yellow-colored kimono with red-colored flower-like designs, loose sleeves around her forearms, and knee-length black leggings. She wore an unchanged expression as she passed everyone by, including Katsuki. He narrowed his eyes onto her, remembering how she fought in the entrance exam. Something about her was familiar to him, yet he couldn't place why. At least not yet. All Might was quick to explain the rules, with the objectives being quite simple. The villain team's job was to safeguard a fake bomb inside the building. They could win by either running the timeout or capturing both members of the hero team. The heroes would win by either retrieving the bomb or capturing the villains. Izuku wound up paired with Ochako, much to his relief, yet also his dismay as he did secretly want to pair up with Rebecca. She wound up with Kyoka. Shiki was paired up with Yuga. Weiss was teamed with Minoru. And Hamura was joining forces with Momo. The first match was decided, pitting Izuku and Ochako against Katsuki and Tenya. And what a first match it would be. Yo, witch, sister greeted, getting the sorcery quirk user's attention as she turned to see the nurse approach her in the hallway. How's the first year at US starting for you? She asked curiously, putting her hands onto her hips. It's been quite interesting thus far, the fellow Shining Star hero admitted in response. From what I gather between both hero course classes, there are at least 6 ether-type quirks, she pointed out in remembrance. One of whom happens to be your very own kid, sister pointed out cheekily. Gotta say, she's filled out nicely, she remarked in a sly tone, licking her lips. Please do not refer to Lady Rebecca in such a way, Ivry. Which pleaded as a drop of sweat trickled down from her head. Sorry. The nurse apologized repeatedly, rubbing the back of her head. I'm really happy for her, though, she noted. As am I, her fellow Shining Star hero agreed. I never imagined that Lady Rebecca would want to travel down the hero path, she admitted, glancing out the window for a moment. But perhaps Sir Izuku had something to do with her change in fate. She assumed. Izuku? Sister repeated in confusion. Oh, Lady Rebecca's childhood friend outside the orphanage, Witch answered. Perhaps if it weren't for him, she would be doing something much differently than take on such a path. She pointed out, letting off a smile. They're doing the training with Toshinori today, huh? The nurse guessed, raising an eyebrow. Wonder if I'll end up seeing one of them. She remarked aloud. I'm sure you've already met Sir Izuku, her fellow Shining Star hero noted, causing her to perk up. He did break his finger yesterday, she recalled. He's that kid? Sister exclaimed upon remembering. Tesk. She scoffed. Chio didn't even let me try my dispel driver to ease his fatigue, she pointed out in frustration. A trickle of sweat rolled down Witch's head as she silently chuckled. Ivry, she continued curiously, getting her fellow Shining Star hero's attention. Have you been in contact with Mio recently? She asked, causing her to blink in surprise. No, actually, she replied. Why? She questioned, raising an eyebrow. Witch hummed and thought, placing a hand onto her chin in thought. When you and I announced our tenures here at this school, I would have assumed she'd take notice and contact us, she told her colleague. Well, I can't blame Hermit for being offline with us, Sister admitted, glancing off to the side. After what happened to Valkyrie. Ivry, please, Witch interjected, causing her fellow Shining Star to silence herself. As worried as I am, I know this is something we can solve, she pointed out. I'll try to reach out to her before the end of today, she promised, walking off. Okay then, the nurse uttered out, giving off an awkward wave goodbye. She wondered just how such a conversation would go between the two Shining Star heroes, who hadn't met in ages. Rebecca couldn't help but fidget nervously as she stared up at the screen in the viewing section for her and the rest of the class. Izuku was about to go up against probably his worst nightmare in Katsuki. And on the other side of things, the explosion quirk user was probably planning to prove just how strong he was to his rival. Someone he wouldn't even have considered a rival up until now. Blue Garden, you good? Kyoka asked of her partner, getting her attention. Oh, yeah, she stuttered in response. It's just, Izuku and I went to the same middle school as Kaken, she pointed out, glancing off to the side for a moment. If you couldn't already tell from yesterday, Kaken's not exactly the nicest person, especially when it comes to us, she mentioned. Sounds rough, the earphone jack quirk user admitted, folding her arms over her chest. Rebecca hummed out as she looked down sadly. It had been rough for her and her best friend. Flashback. Ugh. Izuku groaned out as he lied upon the playground dirt, having taken yet another beating from Katsuki. This is the little boy you were telling me about? Witch asked of Rebecca, who were both standing by the downed little boy.
Mm.
The Leaper quirk user answered with a nod. He's quirkless, so he keeps getting bullied, she mentioned as tears were pricking her eyes. How horrible, her caretaker remarked, kneeling down beside Izuku. I may not be as refined as sister, but I can at least provide him some comfort, she assured. A few moments later, the little boy was sitting up with bandages upon his face, arms, and legs. Do you feel a little better? Witch asked him. He nodded. Thank you, he said meekly with gratitude. Mama, you forgot something, Rebecca pointed out, getting their attentions. And what would that be, Rebecca? Witch asked curiously. It's okay, the Leaper quirk user assured, kneeling down next to her friend. I can do it, she said. She leaned in, closed her eyes, and pecked Izuku's bandaged cheek with her lips. Witch lightly gasped, and the little boy's face went bright red. Rebecca, he stammered out. She blinked in confusion before giggling. Kissing boo-boos always makes the pain go away, she noted to him. That's what Witch always told me, she mentioned, looking over to her caretaker. That's right, Rebecca, she responded with a grin. End flashback. I can't believe I did that back then, Rebecca inwardly admitted with a blush across her cheeks. Oh well, she sighed to herself with a shrug. I'm glad I kept Izuku going for all these years, she admitted inwardly. Now let's hope all that effort paid off, she said inwardly. The match began. Izuku and Ochako snuck into the battle building with ease, carefully making their way around. Izuku knew that using one for all was going to have to be a last resort in case things got too intense. It was just whatever he could do without a quirk and Ochako's zero gravity. Against Katsuki and Tenya, that probably wouldn't be enough. At that moment, the explosion quirk user lunged around the corner to attack, blasting off half of his rival's mask with an explosion as he had protected his partner beforehand. What's the matter, Deku? Katsuki questioned as the smoke settled. Scared to face me, he wondered aloud. Izuku figured that's what his rival would say. He also figured he'd try to come and attack by surprise. I won't hurt you so bad they'll have to stop the fight, the explosion quirk user declared as he charged toward the one-for-all inheritor. Just close, he yelled out, thrusting his right arm forward. However, Izuku grabbed it. Everyone in the viewing section watched as he went ahead and mightily threw his rival right over his shoulder, slamming him hard against the floor. Yeah, take that, Rebecca suddenly cheered with a pump of fist. Her shout was met with looks from everyone though, causing her to blush in embarrassment. Guess we know who she's betting on, Ijiro remarked, folding his arms over his chest. Hey, I'm with her, Mina proclaimed. Same, Toru agreed. The Leaper quirk user giggled sheepishly, rubbing the back of her head. All Might looked to her and smiled. Seems young Blue Garden really did believe in the kid for years. He noted inwardly. I hope that'll help drive him forward, he mentioned to himself. The match continued. Ochako ran off to find the weapon, leaving Izuku to face Katsuki alone. Rather, the plan was to lure him and try to capture him via the capture tape he had been provided. But that was proving to be difficult, especially with how persistent and unpredictable the explosion quirk user was becoming. It came to the point that he wound up using the grenade-like bracers upon him, unleashing a massive blast that burned through the building and could have easily killed Izuku. Seeing that, Rebecca gasped with fright, clasping her hands over her mouth. Sheesh, is that guy nuts? Weiss wondered, scratching at the back of his head. An explosion like that is dangerous, even for a villain. Homura chimed in. Indeed, Momo agreed. Bakugo seems to be more inclined to attack recklessly due to whatever grudge he's holding against Midoriya, she pointed out. Man, the guy's way too strong, Denki commented. Hearing their words, all Rebecca could do was hope and pray that Izuku would somehow find his way out of this match. He was struggling now in such an open space, being unable to counterattack without the power of one for all. It came to the point where he knew he'd have to use it, even knowing what the consequences were. Katsuki shouted at him angrily, thinking that after all those years of being quirkless, his rival was just pretending to be weak to laugh behind his back. That was far from the truth, and that sparked a fire in Izuku. "You idiot," he growled out, clenching his fists tightly. "That's why I want to beat you. Because you're amazing," he roared in declaration. "You're even more of an idiot than I realized." Katsuki snarled back. "Come at me," he bellowed. The two of them charged at each other, ready to land final blows. "They're gonna kill each other," Ijiro exclaimed from the viewing section. "All Might, you gotta stop this," Rebecca begged, thinking her best friend was about to die. But he didn't. Instead, he reared his fist back and thrusted it upward, unleashing a powerful blast of pressurized air that slammed through each of the floors, all while taking Katsuki's explosion. In doing so, he provided Ochako with a means to use a pillar like a baseball bat, hitting debris out to distract Tenya long enough to grab the fake weapon, thus earning her and Izuku the victory. "You," Katsuki growled out afterwards, looking at the aftermath of the final attack. "You were playing me this entire time, you bastard," he yelled to his rival, who looked more battered than he did, with burns along his left arm, while his right was completely broken from his full-powered punch. Tears pricked Rebecca's eyes at the sight. She could only imagine how much pain her best friend was in. Even though he won, he still had a long way to go. Rebecca stared down at the ground despondently. So much of the reason why she was at UA to begin was because of Izuku. He had never given up on his dream to come to All Might's alma mater, and she always supported him. But seeing him battered thanks to what Katsuki had done in their match, it made her worry. "Seriously, are you okay?" Kyoka asked, snapping her away from her thoughts as she looked over to the earphone jack quirk user. "Oh, sorry." She apologized with a wave of her hands. "You're really worried about Midori, huh?" her partner guessed, putting her hands onto her hips while arching an eyebrow. "Yeah," the Leaper quirk user confirmed, balling her hands into fists. "He might be reckless, but he was also really brave to stand up to Kaken," she pointed out, letting off a small smile. "After all that time in middle school, he's deserved this chance to be who he wants to be," she mentioned before taking a deep breath. "Sounds like you're close," Kyoka noted, giving her a small grin. "I guess so," Rebecca agreed with a giggle. "So anyways, about our opponents," she continued, changing the subject. "Yeah, Minta and Steiner," the earphone jack quirk user recalled, narrowing her eyes. "I don't remember their quirks all that much," she said, putting her hand onto her chin. "Me neither," Rebecca responded with a shake of her head. "But we can focus on what we can do and try to plan something with that," she pointed out. "Sounds good," Kyoka agreed as she nodded. "So what's your quirk like?" she asked curiously. "It's an ether type like I talked about in class," Rebecca answered. "I can move really fast," she mentioned on. "And yours?" she questioned. "Earphone jack," Kyoka replied, having her cable-like earlobes curve up for her partner to see. "I can hear lots of things, even from further away when they're plugged in," she explained. "I can also make channel the sound of my own heartbeat through them for attacks," she added. "It's why I got the speakers in my boots," she pointed out, motioning to them. Rebecca hummed and thought. "You can hear all kinds of sounds?" she asked curiously. "Yeah, even small ones from far away," the earphone jack quirk user confirmed in response. "Then I think I've got an idea," her partner decided as she grinned. "Nice trap setting, little dude," Weiss complimented to the pop-off quirk user, who had several of his sticky balls about the room the fake bomb was in, particularly on the floor and walls. "Thanks," Minoru replied with a thumbs up. "So, what's the plan on your end?" he questioned. "I've already laid out my own traps that'll detect Rebecca and that chick with the earlobes," Weiss responded assuredly. Yellow markings appeared along his arms, spreading along the assault rifle he had in his hands. The second they get too close, they'll be sitting ducks, he mentioned with confidence. Weiss Steiner. Quirk. Machina maker. He can remake and remodel machines of any kind. With one touch, he can turn a rifle into a flamethrower or reconfigure an engine. But to use it properly, he needs to know exactly the kind of reconfiguration he needs to make. It's kinda complicated. I'm not normally a betting kind of guy, Weiss noted inwardly as he sauntered through the halls. But I think we've got this match in the bag, he said to himself with confidence, grinning all the while. In the meantime, Kyoka and Rebecca had just entered the building. The former of the pair inserted her jacks into the walls and concentrated. One's on the move, she pointed out after a moment. Betting it's Steiner 'cause it sounds like he's carrying something, she mentioned to her partner. Okay, Rebecca responded. We're both on comms, so we'll keep in touch, she noted, motioning to the communicator in her left ear. Got it, Kyoka replied with a nod. Her teammate went on ahead without a second thought, jogging through the halls. Whenever she'd reach a corner, she'd stop to confirm the all clear from the earphone jack Quirk user. By the time she arrived at the third floor, things seemed to be going swimmingly. A little too swimmingly, in fact. Minta hasn't moved an inch from where I think the bomb is, and I'm pretty sure Steiner just stopped, Kyoka inwardly noted, narrowing her eyes and thought. What are those two up to? She wondered. At that moment, she heard something, widening her eyes. Blue Garden, heads up, she quickly communicated, getting her partner's attention as she stopped where she was in the hallway. What is it, Kyoka? She asked, putting her left hand over her ear to listen more clearly. It sounds like something's shifting where you're heading. The earphone Quirk user relayed. Actually, it's coming right toward you, she pointed out. Rebecca gasped, noticing the panels on the floors and walls opening up before what looked like gun barrels stuck out from them. Huh, she uttered frightfully as she blinked. Ha! Weiss chuckled from afar. Million bullets online, he remarked. The guns in the walls and the floor started firing endlessly as the Leaper Quirk user gasped. Not good. She yelped inwardly, taking a ready stance as her markings appeared upon her legs. Rebecca Bluegarden. Quirk. Leaper. Her ether-type quirk lets her move super fast. Her speed's not at Ida's level, but she can really get going with those quick feet. Rebecca quickly sped forward, evading the cannon fire. Back in the viewing section, everyone watched on in awe. Is Steiner trying to kill her or something? Denki exclaimed in question. Fortunately, no, All Might answered. He's using rubber rounds and those weapons he created, he confirmed to the students. With that kind of versatile quirk, it's weird that he ended up last in the test yesterday. Tsuyu pointed out, putting a finger to her right cheek. Probably 'cause he couldn't use it all that much in those tests. Mina chimed in. Mr. Aizawa did say he cheated on the grip strength one. She recalled. Back in the battle building, Rebecca rounded a corner and blinked in surprise to find Weiss there with his assault rifle at that ready. Don't think you want to end up on the wrong end of this puppy, Rebecca, he remarked as he smirked. However, the Leaper Quirk user wasn't deterred at all. She sped forward in an instant to his shock. He quickly pulled the trigger of his rifle and unleashed a stream of fire from it. Atlas flame, he exclaimed. Whoa, Ijiro yelped from inside the viewing section. He remodeled his rifle into a flamethrower. Homura realized as she narrowed her eyes. Fire spread about the floor and walls as Rebecca found herself grimacing. But then she saw the smirk on Weiss's face. In that one moment, she saw Katsuki, and she growled. I wouldn't try to come at me on your own, Becca, her opponent remarked, ceasing his spraying of fire. All that'll leave you with is a... He stopped talking and gasped to see the Leaper Quirk user lunge out at him, striking him squarely in the face with her right foot, sending him crashing to the floor as he dropped his remodeled rifle. Afterwards, she sped off. Blue Garden, what happened? Kyoka asked over the communication channel between the two. Weiss tried to stop me, but I just took him down, the leaper quirk user answered quickly. Now I'll go get the bomb, she vowed, hurrying around a corner. Minoru nonchalantly whistled, folding his arms behind his head and yawning. He wondered what seemed to be taking his partner so long to get to their opponents, as he hadn't relayed anything for a while. At that moment, he spotted Rebecca speeding in. Ah! He gasped in surprise, quickly plucking a few balls from his head. Found the bomb, the leaper quirk user exclaimed, zipping forward while evading the balls scattered about the floor. Minoru flung a few toward her, but she dodged them as well before smacking her left hand against the fake bomb. Got it, she yelled. A horn sounded off. The hero team wins, All Might bellowed through the loudspeakers. Huh. Rebecca sighed with relief, proud of her efforts. But as she attempted to walk away, she found herself stuck. She glanced down to find that one of Minoru's balls was stuck to the right leg of her jumpsuit and the fake bomb. She paled, quickly attempting to free herself. And she did, at the expense of ripping off a good portion of her jumpsuit to reveal more of her leg's skin. Ah, she gasped, blushing a bright red. She then looked over to the pop-off quirk user, who just shot her a thumbs up. You sick ducky, she exclaimed, kicking him with her right foot. Everyone watching the scene from the viewing section looked on while drops of sweat rolled down from their heads. Battle Building J. This match will be a dazzling display of my prowess, Tilda, Yuga proclaimed as he trotted along gallantly through the halls with Shiki. Okay, the Satan Gravity quirk user responded, glancing about the area. Their opponents were Ijiro and Hanta, who seemed to be pretty tough. But Shiki wasn't that concerned. He put his goggles down over his eyes, looking around. Home. He hummed out. Looks like they're on the floor above us. He noted, causing his partner to come to a halt as he perked up in surprise. I think they're setting a trap for us, he mentioned. There's a lot of lines and stuff. He added. Wait, you can see through walls? Yuga questioned, quite shocked. Yeah, with these goggles, Shiki answered. Hold on a sec, he said, activating his quirk as green lines of energy coursed through his arms. He became outlined in a green glow as he floated up to the ceiling, landing on his feet. Magic attack, he began. On the floor above, both Ijiro and Hanta took ready positions, waiting for their foes. But what they didn't expect. Gravity Fist, Shiki's voice echoed as the floor burst open behind the pair of students, who both gasped as they looked to find the Satan Gravity quirk user with his hand placed onto the fake bomb they were defending. We win, he exclaimed as he removed his goggles from his eyes. Our trap, both Ijiro and Hanta stammered inwardly out of disbelief, hearing Shiki cheekily chuckle. Battle Building E. And there, Momo said as she laid down the last of the metal bars onto the door. They won't be able to break in so easily now, she pointed out, putting her hands onto her hips confidently. Thank you for arranging this, Yaoyorozu, Homura said in gratitude, catching her attention as she looked to see her partner wandering off. I do not know if we shall need this barricade, but I do think it is helpful, she admitted. Well, I'm glad to help, the creation quirk user assured as a reply. By the way, she continued curiously, making her partner stop for a moment. I couldn't help but notice that you hadn't used your quirk during the physical exams Mr. Aizawa had us go through, she recalled. And you were one of the top finishers, she mentioned. I found no need to use my quirk for such things, Homura replied. Rather, I did not think it would help me during those trials, she admitted on. I suppose that's fair, Momo concluded, putting a hand onto her chin. Still, I think it'd be best if you told me how your quirk works, so that we can formulate a strategy, she insisted. Homura responded with a nod, holding up her right arm. Red lines of energy appeared upon it and glowed. The creation quirk user found herself in complete shock. Those lines are, she started to realize. Later in the building, Fumikage and Suyu were scouring about for their opponents and the fake weapon. At one point, The dark shadow quirk user took notice of something ahead. He stuck his left arm out in front of his partner, causing her to stop. "What do you see, Tokoyami?" she asked him. "So only you've come to face us," he concluded, seeing that Homura lied ahead of them as the red lines along her arms glowed brightly. Formed in her hands were a pair of energy blades shaped like katanas with rings serving as their tsuba. "Ribbit," Tsuyu croaked. "Those blades are." She started to exclaim. "Yes, these once were my master's," Homura confirmed, taking on a serious expression. "Homura Kojutsu, quirk, soul blade. By channeling her ether energy, she create all sorts of bladed weapons. Her favorites are katanas. So, Valkyrie took on a student, HM?" All Might inquired inwardly from back in the viewing section. "In honor of my master's teachings, I will defeat both of you," Homura vowed before rushing forward. After getting herself dressed in her uniform, Rebecca quickly hurried off with permission to the nurse's office. There, she found Izuku still asleep in the bed, as his injuries had been tended to, though not completely as his stamina had already been drained. She sat herself down beside him, giving off a sad look. "I'm sure my dispel driver would help fix him up real quick, Chio," Sister's voice pointed out, getting the Leaper quirk user's attention as she saw her and Recovery Girl walk in. "If I've already told you once, I'll tell you 1,000 times more." The Heal quirk user began seriously. "I am not letting you damage my patients' minds with your sadistic fantasies," she declared firmly. "Tesk." Sister scoffed in frustration, glancing away. However, she and the main nurse then took notice of Rebecca. "Oh, hello," she greeted, standing up from her seat and bowing to them. "Thank you for taking care of Izuku," she said politely with gratitude. "Oh, it's no trouble at all, dearie," Chio assured. "The only problem I'm having is keeping her from acting so crude," she pointed out, motioning toward Sister. "Hey!" she shouted angrily. Meanwhile, Rebecca looked back at her sleeping best friend. "When's he gonna get up?" she asked out of concern. "Probably not before too long," Sister assured in response. "But this guy can sure take some punishment," she pointed out, folding her arms underneath her chest. "Yeah." The Leaper quirk user agreed with a nod. At that moment, she thought back to when she had kissed him during their childhood. All because that's what Witch had done with her bruises and scrapes. Smiling softly, she leaned down and pecked the one for all inheritor's cheek with her lips, closing her eyes beforehand. Sister looked on in surprise before letting off a smirk. I better get back to class now," Rebecca stuttered out, blushing a little before she got up and jogged off down the hall. "Heh," Sister chuckled out. "You've got your work cut out for you, Witch," she noted to herself. "Huh." Rebecca sighed later that evening as she laid down in her bed. Happy was already asleep in his own, snoozing softly. After the Leaper quirk user had left school, she discovered that Izuku had met up with Katsuki and even told him about how the power he had wasn't his own. At least, not yet. Why the hell would he even do that? She wondered inwardly, staring up at the ceiling. Fortunately, it didn't seem like Katsuki understood what his rival was even saying and brushed him off, a lot more frustrated about being weaker than his classmates like Shoto or Homura, both of whom displayed immense potential. There was so much for Rebecca to think about, but she decided to let it go for now. Closing her eyes, she drifted off to sleep. When she opened them, though, she found herself in her hero costume, standing in what looked like a pavilion of sorts, where a fountain lied at the center. Immediately confused, she glanced around to find Tsuyu, Minoru, and Izuku there, with the latter wearing his pea clothes while having his mask, gloves, and elbow guards. She looked out to see Shota fighting a villain ahead of where they were. He was a slim man with pale skin, tinged yellow teeth, and wrinkled a great deal around his eyes. His lips were chapped and uneven, a small mole on the right underneath, with visible scars on his right eye and under his lip. He had messy grayish-blue hair of varying lengths, the longest clumps reaching to about his shoulders, left hanging over his face in uneven waves. His eyes and mouth were obscured by the hand over his face. In fact, she sported 14 hands altogether upon his person as he rushed out at the erasure hero. What's going on? Rebecca stuttered in question. And without warning, she saw the villain appear in front of her and her friends. She didn't have a second to react before he grabbed onto Tsuyu and Minoru, disintegrating them into dust. The Leaper quirk user was horrified. And then she saw the villain turn toward a scared-looking Izuku. "Don't!" she screamed desperately. However, she felt herself get grabbed by a large hand. She looked back and gasped to find a creature behind her that had dark skin, a beak-like head, and an exposed brain. Its grip on her felt crushing as she screamed in agony. "Rebecca!" Izuku cried out, jumping to her. However, the villain grabbed him by his leg and started turning him into dust. All the Leaper quirk user could do was watch as her best friend disintegrated before her very eyes. Afterwards, the villain removed the hand from his face to give her a frightening grin. "Game over," he uttered out. "Ah," Rebecca screamed, waking up in a cold sweat as she sat up. Trembling, she grabbed onto her arms and cried in fear. That nightmare had felt so real. And though she didn't realize it yet, it would be quite foretelling. "Becca, can you come over to my place before school?" "Huh?" Izuku uttered upon reading the message on his phone. He was never invited over to Rebecca's apartment. Granted, he was a boy, and his mother likely didn't want him to be alone with a girl unless they were in school. And the Leaper quirk user probably understood just how nervous he'd be about such a prospect. So this unusual text first thing in the morning was a little concerning. Izuku quickly ate his breakfast, having the ability to only use his left hand for the given moment, as his right was still casted. "Why are you in such a rush, Izuku?" his mother asked, seeing him quickly grab his bag and put on his shoes. "I, need to meet up with the teacher about something from yesterday," he answered vaguely. "See you tonight," he called out in farewell, hurrying off before Inko could say a word. Rebecca's apartment wasn't that far from where he lived. He hurried up the stairs to the 3rd floor, quickly checking the numbers on the rooms. 27, 28. He counted before arriving in front of the door with 29 on it. He gulped before knocking twice. A few moments went by before the door opened. "Hey, Izuku," Rebecca greeted rather despondently, dressed for the day, but with a very tired look on her face. Rebecca," Izuku stuttered out worriedly. "Is everything okay?" he asked her. She didn't respond, looking down sadly. "Do you need a hug?" her best friend guessed. At that moment, the Leaper quirk user blinked in surprise before looking up at him shimmering eyes. Tears flowed out from her eyes as she embraced the one-for-all inheritor, trembling all the while. Quite stunned, Izuku stood still for a moment before wrapping his left arm around her waist. Clearly, there was a lot for them to talk about. "Your arm feel okay?" she asked later while sitting on the train beside him, having calmed down from earlier. "I guess so," he answered. "It'll be as good as new after Recovery Girl and Sister get a look at it," he assured. "Though I'm probably gonna need a cup of coffee afterwards," he joked, causing her to giggle. "I'm sorry for bawling like a baby," she apologized, closing her hands into fists over her knees. "The truth is, I had a nightmare," she admitted. "Oh," Izuku uttered out. "What was it?" he asked out of concern. "I saw you, and that great pervert all get turned to dust," Rebecca answered, lowering her head. "I tried to save you, but," she continued, "the bad guy got to you first." She remembered. "And I was held back by this freaky monster guy," she mentioned. "Rebecca," Izuku uttered out. Without really thinking about it, he grabbed her right hand with his left, holding it gently. "You don't have to worry," he assured to her as she looked to him with a surprised expression on her face. "I'm here," he said. The Leaper quirk user's eyes shimmered before she smiled brightly. You really are cool, Izuku, she pointed out, causing him to blush a little before he gave off an awkward smile. The day went ahead a little more smoothly than most. In reviewing the battle training footage, Shota did reprimand Izuku and Katsuki for their behaviors during battle. He also singled out Minoru for being overly perverse during his match. Rebecca felt herself smirk at his dismay. She was starting to feel a little better. But images of her dream flashed in her head for a few brief moments. It had been so real that she thought her classmates and her best friend had perished into dust. But it wasn't real, so she had nothing to worry about. What she did need to worry about. We need to pick a class rep, Shota stated. Just like a normal school, every student exclaimed in response. Everyone wanted to take on the class representative role, each putting out ideas for new school rules. In the end, it was decided that it'd be a democratic process, courtesy of Tenya. And after tallying the votes, I got 5, Izuku exclaimed in shock. All right. Katsuki growled out as he shot up from his seat. Who the hell voted for him? He questioned angrily. What? Did you honestly think anyone was going to vote for you? Hanta guessed. I'm more than happy with who I voted for, Rebecca remarked, giving Izuku a wink. He blushed, smiling awkwardly. He was the class rep, while Momo was the deputy with 3 votes. Already, things were looking up for him. Huh. Rebecca sighed, seating herself down at her table for lunch after gathering her food. She decided to sit away from Izuku today, wanting to have some space to think. Her nightmare was still lingering in her head. She needed something to get her mind off of it. Hey Blue Garden, are you dating Midoriya? Mina suddenly asked, setting her tray down next to the Leaper quirk user. She immediately spat out the water she had been drinking and broke into a heavy blush. Okay, maybe that wasn't what she needed to get her mind off of her nightmare. WH what? She stammered out in question. Where'd you get that idea from? She inquired with another stutter. From me, Kyoka answered, getting her attention. Sorry, Blue Garden. She apologized. I only told them you two went to the same school together. She recalled, scratching her right cheek sheepishly. Them? Rebecca stammered. We were curious, too. Ribbit, Tsuyu croaked as she also approached. Yeah, Toru agreed, also amongst the group. Momo and Homura were there as well. I must admit, I assumed Midoriya, and you were a couple based on how supportive of him you were. The Soul Blade quirk user confessed, causing Rebecca to look over at her in surprise. Ah, forgive me. She apologized, putting her left hand sheepishly over her mouth. I speak my mind quite often. She pointed out. I thought the same thing, Momo admitted. Rebecca's blush grew heavier. So? Mina inquired, leaning closer to her with a big grin, nudging her shoulder against hers. I'm not dating Izuku, she stuttered in response emphatically. Sure, he's been my best friend since we were little kids, but… Ooh, you were friends from when you were little, Mina interjected excitedly. I smell a romance blossoming, Tilda, she noted in a sing-song voice. There wasn't any romance, Rebecca stammered, really embarrassed at this point. Knock it off, Ashido, Kyoka advised, poking the acid quirk user with her jacks. Huh. Rebecca exhaled to calm herself after a moment. If I'm being honest, the only I wouldn't want that kind of relationship with Izuku is because of how it could ruin our friendship if it goes south. She told her female classmates, and I mean, she continued, we'd be less focused on our schoolwork, probably. She pointed out. That's true, Tsuyu agreed with a nod. But hey, if it could work out in the future, would you take your shot with him? Toru asked curiously. Rebecca's blush returned, though it was less severe than before. I don't know, she admitted, glancing down in thought as she clutched her skirt. But she kept going, letting off a small smile. I wouldn't mind finding out with him. she confessed. Mina and Toru squealed with delight, prompting Kyoka to jab them by using her jacks to get them to calm down. The Leaper quirk user did have a lot to think about, but at least any worries over her nightmare were completely gone. The rest of the day was quite crazy. After an alarm had sent the students into a frenzy, and Tenya working to calm them down, he was named the new Class 1A representative by Izuku's choice. Rebecca was a bit upset that he was deciding to step down from the leadership role, but did realize that he probably wasn't ready for such a responsibility yet. And with that, the next day came. The Leaper quirk user had a much more pleasant dream as she and Izuku made their way to UA for another day of studies. Classes went along smoothly up to the hero training, which involved rescuing. "Hey Deku, what happened to your costume?" Ochako asked later as they were gathered outside, approaching the one for all inheritor as he donned his gym uniform with his elbow and knee guards, his belt and gloves. Taking notice, Rebecca trembled a little before grabbing onto her left arm. "Calm down," she advised of herself, taking a deep breath. It was just a bad dream, she noted inwardly, letting off a small smile. After getting onto the bus and beginning the journey to the training facility, many conversations were started, including Tsuyu asking about Izuku's quirk, and how it was a lot like All Might's. "Hold on, Tsu," Ijiro chimed in. "You're forgetting that All Might doesn't hurt himself when he uses his quirk," he pointed out, much to the freckled teen's relief as he sighed with gratitude. As the conversation continued, leading to Katsuki getting teased by Tsuyu and Denki, Izuku looked over to see Rebecca sitting across from him. He gave her a soft smile, which she returned. "Are you dating?" Mina's voice echoed in her head suddenly, causing her to blink in surprise. She glanced over to see the teasing grin on the acid quirk user's face as she wiggled her eyebrows up and down. The Leaper quirk user felt her cheeks go red as she sighed deeply. "If we're going to talk more about flashy quirks and all." Denki chimed in. "Then what about Kojutsu?" he questioned, causing Homura to perk up. "She's got the same quirk as Valkyrie," he noted. "Wait, what?" Izuku yelped in surprise, having not learned of such details until just now. "How did you get that kind of quirk anyway?" Mashirao asked curiously. "Ether-type quirks can be fully inherited by another person, even if they aren't related by blood," Homura pointed out to her classmates. "You must believe I stole Valkyrie's quirk, do you not?" she inquired of them. "And no, nothing like that," Meshiro quickly assured in response with a stutter, waving his hands in a placating manner. "It's just that you're really good with it," he noted in a complimentary tone. A light smile crossed the Soul Blade quirk user's face. "I had a good teacher," she said. Hearing that, Katsuki glanced back at her curiously, narrowing his eyes. "I got my quirk inherited from my grandpa," Shiki chimed in, raising his right hand. "Honestly, I think mine was just from birth," Rebecca admitted as she scratched at her right cheek. "What about yours, Weiss?" she inquired curiously to the machina maker quirk user. "It's not important," he responded vaguely, making her groan in annoyance. Eyes sharp. "Class 1A? Tenya suddenly called out, getting everyone's attention. "We've arrived at our destination," he noted seriously as the bus came to a stop. The UST was huge and had several facilities in which the students would be able to conduct rescue training in. No doubt was Izuku excited the most out of everyone to get a chance to partake in this experience. However, there was something strange going on. All Might was absent. Only Shota and 13 were there. By all accounts, the number one hero should have been amongst the teachers. Wonder what could have happened. Rebecca whispered over to Izuku, who narrowed his eyes. "Anyways, we should get started," Shota insisted. All of a sudden, though, the lights flickered. And then at the center pavilion of the building, which the Leaper quirk user recognized as the setting of her nightmare, a purple void opened up. And walking out from it was none other than the villain she had seen. She trembled in fright. Her nightmare was coming true. Rebecca felt herself tremble with fright as she watched the villains pour out from the purple void. One of them was a tall, muscular man, with a tattoo spelling the name of Sibir on his head, where he had no hair. He also had some sort of piercings on his chin with dark orb-like earrings. He also appeared to have a robotic arm on his right side, with a type of black shirt that only covered the sleeve on the left, exposing his abdomen. He also appeared to be wearing some sort of futuristic baggy pants. Those are villains, Shota confirmed to his students, who all gasped in surprise. Izuku then noticed the look of abject horror on his best friend's face, blinking in surprise. Villains here? Homura questioned. How could that have happened? She wondered aloud. Isn't this a secure facility? She asked in a whisper. Good point. Momo chimed in. 13. Why aren't the alarms going off? She inquired to the space hero, getting her attention. I'm not sure. She answered honestly. There was no telling why the villains were there either. But it clear that this operation was carefully calculated. The Asju was an isolated facility from the rest of UA, and the villains had thought things out. Meanwhile, Weiss spotted the bald one standing alongside the villain with the disembodied hands upon his body and the monstrous one, widening his eyes in disbelief. That guy, he uttered out. What the hell's he doing here? He questioned, trembling as he closed his hands into fists. Shiki overheard, looking over to him in concern. Shota threw on his goggles, prepared to fend off the villains while instructing the students to get out and contact the main campus. Izuku pointed out how his quirk was only good in one-on-one confrontations, to which he replied, Can't be a pro with only one trick, he remarked, much to his surprise as he blinked. At that, he went ahead and took on the villains all by himself, taking down one after another without breaking too much of a sweat. Tisk. The bald villain scoffed from afar. Eraser's gonna be giving us quite a hell of a time, Shigaraki. He pointed out to the hand-wearing villain. Might want to sick that Namu on him before too long, he suggested. Watch your tone, Sibir. The crusty-skinned villain advised. Kurogiri, he began to the man beside him, who was covered in a dark purple fog with a metal brace around his neck. Go deal with the children, he requested. Of course, Tamura Shigaraki, the misty villain responded. As Izuku watched Shota continue to take down villains in the pavilion, he looked over to see the trembling Rebecca as her eyes shook. And no, she stuttered out in fear. It can't be, she stammered, shaking all the while. Rebecca, hey, her best friend called out as he ran over to her. We gotta go, he yelled to her. He noticed the fear building in her eyes as tears pricked them. Realizing that she was in a state of total shock, the one-for-all inheritor instinctively grabbed her by the wrist and ran off with her, causing her to yelp in surprise. It's gonna be okay, he quickly assured. We'll be fine, he added as a promise as she blinked in shock. He was normally so timid and scared. Yet he carried that determined look in his eyes as he ran with her to the exit. But all of a sudden, Kurogiri appeared before all of the students before they could escape. It turned out the villain's objective was to go after All Might. But because he wasn't present, that left them with a call to make sure no one escaped and called for backup. Shiki, Ijiro and Katsuki were quick to attack the warping villain, resulting in a huge cloud of smoke after an explosion. Did you think we were gonna let you tear this place to shreds? The hardening quirk user wondered aloud. Now let us through, Shiki demanded angrily. However, they were caught by surprise as Kurogiri appeared to be unaffected by their attacks. Now then, he began, expanding his misty body to surround the entire class. I'll scatter you across this facility to meet my comrades, he decided. And your deaths, he proclaimed fiercely as the black mist rushed over everyone in Class 1A. All the while, Izuku held on to Rebecca the whole time. In that moment, the two of them found themselves falling through a void down toward the water below. The one-for-all inheritor maneuvered himself to strike the water first, while holding his best friend in his arms. They splashed into it, submerged for a moment. That villain must have a warping quirk, Izuku inwardly realized, letting go of Rebecca as they both started to swim to the surface, prioritizing their safety over everything else for the moment. With All Might not here, the situation was much more dire. All of a sudden, the pair of student heroes widened their eyes to see a shark-like villain coming towards them. Instinctively, the leaper quirk user swam out defensively in front of her friend despite having the same look of fear upon her face. The villain opened his mouth to chomp down on both of them, only to be kicked away by Tsuyu, who had just arrived with Minoru under her left arm. "Hey Midoriya, Blue Garden," she greeted, shooting her long tongue out to wrap around both of them. She yanked them away, swimming off. Moments later, they were pulled out from the water and put onto a boat in the middle of the lake, panting to catch their breath. "Izuku, you okay?" Rebecca asked of her best friend, sitting up with him. "Yeah," he replied assuredly, squeezing his waterlogged gloves. "And what about you?" he questioned out of concern, remembering just how frightened she was earlier. "I really don't know," she honestly answered, trembling a little. The pieces of her nightmare were coming together. It was her, Izuku, Tsuyu, and Minoru as one group. The villains included the likes of the hand-faced man and the monstrous creature. Why is this happening? She wondered aloud, grasping both sides of her head as she whimpered. Her best friend reached over and held onto her shoulders warmly. "Don't worry, we'll get out of this," he promised to her as she perked up in surprise. She gave off a small smile, thankful for his reassurance. Watching the scene from nearby aboard the boat, Tsuyu put a curious finger to her cheek. She had to wonder if Izuku and Rebecca were more than just mere friends. More importantly, though, they were surrounded by villains throughout what was the shipwreck zone. The four students started to think about their foe's objective to take out All Might, wondering how exactly they planned to do it. But even more so than that, they had to stop the villains before they could succeed. "Let's be heroes," Izuku insisted firmly without a glint of doubt in his eyes. Seeing that filled Rebecca with confidence. Even if her nightmare was coming true, seeing her best friend's determination made her throw away any of those doubts. Landslide zone. "Aren't you embarrassed to lose to children?" Shoto inquired to the villains he had frozen in ice. "For God's sake, you're adults," he muttered out. "True," Homura agreed, slashing down her foes about the area with ease with her energy blades. "My swords aren't nearly sated by these fiends," she pointed out, leaping over a few more villains before finishing them off. "They should put up a real fight." The half-cold, half-hot quirk user noted aloud. "Collapse zone." Katsuki roared before blasting another villain back inside a ruined building with an explosion, almost hitting Weiss in the process. "Geez," the Machina Maker quirk user yelped in surprise. "Watch where the hell you're aiming, you jerk," he shouted to his explosive classmate. "Shut it, grease monkey," he yelled back. "Guys, now's not the time," Ijiro called out seriously before punching another villain away with his hardened right fist. "Yeah, I know," Weiss agreed, firing off steady rounds of rubber bullets from his assault rifle to knock down their foes. He thought back to when he had seen Sibir at the pavilion. "If that guy's here, then we're all in a lot of trouble," he pointed out under his breath. Mountain zone. Shiki took on a defensive stance alongside Kyoka, Momo, and Denki, being surrounded by several villains. The creation quirk user formed a sword for her female classmate while also making a metal staff for herself. The goggled boy with them took on a fierce expression towards their foes, prepared to fight them. Shipwreck zone. "What the hell do you mean we should fight?" Minoru frantically questioned aboard the boat. "Are you crazy?" he yelled out. "These guys might be able to kill All Might, and you're thinking we should fight them?" he inquired on with tears pricking his eyes. His babbling was met with Rebecca kicking him in the face, knocking him down onto the floor. "Shut up already," she growled out. "Yes, ma'am." the pop-off quirk user weakly. Anyway, I'm not against the idea of fighting back, especially given the mess we're in. Rebecca noted to Izuku and Tsuyu. But we're not exactly at an advantage here, she pointed out in concern. Yeah, true. Her best friend agreed, putting her hand onto her chin. The villains had thought a lot of things through, especially with the kinds they had deployed in the shipwreck zone. But something wasn't adding up. The fact that Tsuyu was warped along to the specific zone where she'd have a clear advantage was a dead giveaway. The villains didn't know their quirks. That was their advantage. So the UA students quickly conversed over them. My quirk gives me super speed, Rebecca told her friends. It's an ether type, so it only works for so long. And, she continued, wondering if what she had seen in her nightmare had something to do with her power. What's wrong, Blue Garden? Tsuyu asked, putting a finger to her cheek curiously. Oh, nothing. The Leaper quirk user stammered in response, waving her hands. I was just thinking to myself, she admitted. Izuku looked to worriedly, wondering if she was still hung up on her nightmare. All of a sudden, the villains attacked, cleaving the ship entirely in half. Frantic and scared, Minoru threw off several of his sticky balls at them. They didn't touch them though as they plopped into the water, which Izuku and Rebecca noticed. So Minta, Tsuyu began. Are you sure the hero thing is really for you? She wondered curiously. Shut up. The pop-off quirk user yelled back. I wasn't expecting to die after just one day at UA, you know? He pointed out as tears of fright poured from his eyes. I never even got to touch Yaoyorozu or Blue Garden's boobs, he mentioned aloud. Hey, Rebecca yelled angrily, gnashing her teeth together. An enemy that's certain of their victory is bound to make a mistake. Izuku chimed in, getting their attentions. All Might said something along those lines during a TV interview once, he added. What does that mean? Minoru asked with a stutter. He was shocked to see just how determined the One for All inheritor was, as he turned back to his classmates. We can stop them here and now, he assured. This is our chance, he declared as they blinked in surprise. Izuku. Rebecca uttered out in surprise. Moments later, a plan had been set. Tsuyu held onto Minoru in her right arm, while Rebecca had her markings appear upon her legs. She looked over to Izuku, who planted his foot onto the railing of the sinking boat. Now die, he yelled, sounding like Katsuki as he leapt from the vessel. Stupid move, kid, one of the villains shouted, about to attack him with an arm formed from water. However, the One for All inheritor readied himself, curling his left middle finger in and holding it back with his thumb. A full-powered smash wouldn't work in this situation given how the villains were circled around the sinking ship. Not to mention, with other enemies lurking about the USG, he couldn't sacrifice an arm just yet. So in imagining the egg not exploding. Take this, he exclaimed. Delaware. Sima ash, he yelled, flicking his finger to unleash a pressurized blast of air onto the water, breaking his two fingers while also blasting the villains away in the water. He winced in pain, but steeled himself. Rebecca, Sue, Minta, he called out to his allies. Right. The Leaper quirk user responded, quickly running and leaping out to catch him in her arms. What followed was Tsuyu hopping up and grabbing onto both of them with her tongue to yank them away. In the process, Minoru finally acted as he threw off several of his balls from his head onto the water. As the water rushed back to middle, dragging the villains in, they all found themselves entrapped by the sticky balls before they were blasted away by the resulting blast of the previous attack. Looks like we rounded 'em all up, the frog quirk user noted. Not too shabby, she complimented. You two were pretty amazing, she added to Izuku and Minoru. Rebecca gave off a soft smile to her best friend. Yeah, you were, she agreed. Seeing that expression, Izuku managed to force a smile back. They had cleared the shipwreck zone.